today's Maelstrom of lore.
Imperial stuff? Like, okay, so there's Imperial stuff. Like, I don't even know what that means.
As well as...
So this is
Realm of
Age of Sigmar,
which
lore.
is Warhammer Fantasy lore. Whether you like it or not, it is Warhammer Fantasy lore.
And also...
And as much as we will advance the lore and all that kind of stuff, it's your world. And so what happens next? It's like a choose-your-own-adventure frickin' book.
This is the Maelstrom of lore.
MiniWarGamer Dave here from MiniWarGaming.com. Welcome, Wargamers, to the Maelstrom of lore. That hit the main camera before it even went there and did anything. Hi, Steve. How are you? This is gonna be... Hi. Steve's here. He's behind the camera. We got the boys. Okay.
boys.
Everyone's here. We're going to jump right into the old world because I personally know next to nothing. So everything will be brand new to me. If this is your brand new time hearing about the old world, Warhammer Fantasy, then we're going to dive right in. And I have many questions, many questions to which hopefully we have answered today. And if not, then they're not going to be answered.
It'll be a short episode.
Yeah, it'll be a short episode. But I'm pretty sure it's going to be more than nothing, more than not.
Oh,
a
for
short
sure.
episode.
Yeah.
Yes.
Definitely like one of my weaker subjects, but I'm still confident enough, I'd say.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's a good thing.
I know the game mechanically well, and I know the vampire stuff pretty well.
Nice.
And the undead stuff pretty well. Some of the Imperial stuff.
Imperial stuff? Like, okay, so there's Imperial stuff. Like, I don't even know what that means.
Oh, fair. Are we describing this to an 8-year-old?
Definitely. Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Do you know what a dwarf is?
I think I know what a dwarf is.
Do you know what an elf is?
Okay, so there's orcs. Nope, you didn't even say that at all.
Well, that was my next one.
That was the next one.
Right, though. It turns out there's orcs.
All right, so there's orcs, elves, dwarves, and
Vampires.
And vampires.
Humans.
Excellent. There's humans.
Of many different varieties.
Ooh. So, like, what does that mean?
Wow. I trapped myself on that one. Different cultures of people.
Okay, so yeah, actually, you know what? This is Noobhammer, and so that is a very good way of, yeah. So let's say that to an 8-year-old, which I'm an 8-year-old.
Yeah.
Okay, so
do you like orcs? Do you like
yes?
Do you like zombies? Do you like vampires?
Definitely.
Do you like dwarves?
All of it.
It all exists in one beautiful setting.
You want to kick a hornet's nest?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll say something that some people won't like, but it doesn't mean I don't like the stuff. I think Warhammer Fantasy is great. Because of the time it was created and how long it's been around, if you could compare it a lot to it feels like a generic fantasy setting. And I say feels like, yeah, go ahead, put your rage in the comments. Just how like D&D feels like a generic fantasy setting. And I think that's because that's almost an honor to say that. It's kind of like, and I don't know if where whatever country you guys are from, what you call it, but we say Kleenex for tissues, right? Because Kleenex is the major brand.
What's a tissue? It's a Kleenex.
Right. We say Kleenex.
Velcro.
Yeah, it's that kind of stuff. Like if your brand becomes synonymous with the thing, that's an honor.
You've done it.
Even though it kind of makes it annoying for actual brand association.
Very annoying.
Yeah, it's still you won capitalism. Congratulations. Agreed. So when I say Warhammer Fantasy is kind of a generic fantasy setting, I say it in the sense that if you think of what you think about elves and dwarves and humans, and how dwarves live in mountains and elves live in forests, and like high elves are haughty and they think they're better than everybody else, and the humans are more like knights and that kind of stuff, and you're thinking bows and arrows and pikes and halberds and shields, you're most likely you can already, without knowing anything more about Warhammer Fantasy, probably write a story that will fit in the Warhammer Fantasy lore. Now, of course, knowing about the events and stuff will help you to write a better story. But if I just wrote some dwarves went to war with elves, boom, that's Warhammer Fantasy. It's also D&D, and heck, it's also like Tolkien.
Yep.
But so yeah, I think that's a good way to kind of approach it, not to diminish it again, but because it's been around for so long. If you're around for long enough, your thing becomes the generic thing that everybody else bases it off of. Just how like Tolkien is like, now that's almost generic fantasy when you look at Tolkien. It's, oh yeah, dwarves and elves and orcs and humans. That's
dinosaurs.
Dinosaurs.
But now where it diverges from that is the
what does that mean?
Stories it tells. Yeah. The stories it tells is what differentiates it.
Okay, so here's a question: What came first, Tolkien or Warhammer Fantasy?
Tolkien, hands down.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
D&D came before fantasy because fantasy was based off of D&D.
Yep. Fantasy is not like old world. The old world is not like an original. Not a lot of original ideas out there, really, right? But it's got enough flair. If you look at the dwarves, one of their coolest, most unique things, probably one of the more popular thing, is the Slayer Oath. for the dwarves is really cool. So
What's the Slayer Oath?
So you would have a dwarf, right? Like as I say, dwarf in fantasy, you have 100% pictured what that dwarf looks like. However, they're very honor bound, much like a dwarf would be in most other fantasy settings. However, if they are like perceived personally or by their peers to break their honor, they take something called a Slayer Oath, which is they, in so few ways, generally their goal is to die doing something extremely cool, I guess.
Kind of heroic,
rather heroic,
or at least like a redemptive
like a
kind of thing.
redeeming thing. Like they want to go find the biggest, baddest thing and kill it, or go kill the most notorious champion of their common foe at the time.
You're a little off.
Yeah.
So
I love
once they
it.
dishonor themselves or their clan, there is no redeeming themselves.
There is no
They
redeeming.
are honor bound to do suicide.
Yeah.
This
They're
is
honor-bound.
dwarves specifically.
This
But
is,
they can't. Yeah, but it's
But
gonna
they
be.
can't actually just kill themselves. So they have to find a foe that can do it.
yeah. They
But they
can't.
have to
Yeah.
try. They can't just give up.
They have to go until they're killed. That's like so. There's
But then are they considered that their honors return to them,
never,
Their honor will never
never come back.
even when they die?
Correct.
So then, what's the point of them taking this oath?
Well, because it doesn't like fully give you your honor back, but it kind of
You did the thing.
Like, at least you did your Slayer Oath.
did the
There
thing,
would be a secondary dishonor by not doing your Slayer Oath.
Yeah.
So it's like you go to this hell,
You
but then
all-
if you don't do that, you go to like super dwarf hell.
Well, it's kind of like
not-
you
doesn't work
you at
that
least be put in a book somewhere saying like Joe did the Slayer thing.
Yeah, so that sounds like a redemption kind of thing.
Well, like a
But
partial.
beside it, you'll be like,
right?
this is why he had to do the thing.
It doesn't erase all the stuff that you ended up having to do the Slayer Oath for. Like they still remember you not fondly. But
you know,
it's like-
that does sound right for Warhammer Fantasy because, and this is where we'll kind of find those things that are unique to Warhammer Fantasy over D&D and all these other ones. So like grudges for dwarves is a huge thing.
That's a big thing. They
Where
angry.
it's like if you want to like if you know how you get like Klingons are all this way and Romulans are all this way in the Star Trek universe, like if you put these one-dimensional traits on it, if I had to add one for dwarves in Warhammer Fantasy, it would be grudges. Where it's like they
Not stubborn, not greed, but grudges.
Correct.
all of that too.
No,
Well,
that's not
greed
unique.
too,
That's
but-
not unique. That's just dwarves in general. If you want, take your typical dwarf from Tolkien and D&D. Now add, and this is the unique-ish thing that they added, which is grudges. That the dwarves will never, ever, ever forget if you do something wrong to them. They even have books dedicated to recording grudges.
One of
And
their,
like generations later, they'll be like, my great-great-great-grandfather was slighted by this elf, so we're going after his kids.
and they live a long time. Dwarves live a long time.
Yeah.
Well, they're actually closer to like Tolkien dwarves and how long they live, for like hundreds of years.
Right.
Not like immortal, but they live for quite a long time.
So it makes sense that the Slayer Oath wouldn't remove their dishonor, but it's kind of more like it wraps it in a nice chocolate outside. So it's like, you know, that you don't want to bite into that, but at least they're not as bad as the dude that didn't do it.
Yeah, would it be like a Slayer Oath is like a grudge against their own people, I suppose? I guess.
I there's
think-
probably a story somewhere where one guy dishonored his clan and didn't take the Slayer Oath.
Oh, there's probably
Probably-
plenty. There's probably
Well,
plenty.
Well, I,
Those are the super dishonored.
See, I don't know if
they go to run and live amongst the humans. Actually, I'm pretty sure.
I think
Oh, geez.
I think the point is that if you went down that route that you didn't take the Slayer Oath, like they just don't write anything about you. Like I don't think that gets recorded.
which would be
I
even
think,
worse for the dwarf.
I think that because I'd be curious with the dwarves, is that just do they not record that part of history? Is that where they just erase everything about you and you just don't exist anymore?
I guess that would honestly be worse for the.
Well, they want to be remembered.
They
right?
want to be remembered.
They
And
want to be
you have to honor
important
your
in their clan.
ancestors. and
So
all
here's a
that.
question then. Okay, so as a
Yeah.
brand new person coming into this, you guys are mentioning this specifically about dwarves. Is that like one of the biggest
No,
draws
I'm just saying that like
to Warhammer
just to
or the old
separate
world?
Warhammer Fantasy from a more generic. They do have a lot of like unique traits.
Okay,
which
so
is
it's like
nice.
that's an
Yeah.
example of a unique trait.
Oh, there's a ton of that kind of stuff. And this is where people would have a problem with me saying Warhammer Fantasy is a generic fantasy thing, because people who are like super into it, who've read a lot of the novels, will be like, no, it's nothing like Tolkien. It's nothing like that. And it's like, you're right. You're absolutely right. But if you want to describe it to somebody, you're not going to be like, okay, what's Warhammer Fantasy? Well, there's these dwarves, and their thing is they have grudges. It's like, no, you'd start by saying, okay, it's a fantasy thing, has dwarves, orcs, elves,
And how-
humans.
all the things you like.
It has
about dwarves.
undead, has
It feels kind of Tolkien.
you know, it even has like lizard men.
That's a
I'll go
strength
one
of it, I
step
think,
farther
yeah.
on you, Matt. I think if anybody argues it's not like Tolkien, they're being ridiculously stubborn,
Right.
unreasonable.
Well,
But you know,
Definitely-
war gamers,
Right.
us
I know.
included. are ridiculously stubborn. We're all dwarves.
I think the part that we haven't touched on is that for me, fantasy was always, you took like a lot of the Tolkien kind of themes and things from the different races, you crank that up to 11, and then you smush in European history.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that's Warhammer Fantasy in a nutshell.
So
like,
you have like your high fantasy settings like Dungeons and Dragons, and you have your extremely high fantasy settings like other examples
like
and
Age of Sigmar.
and then
What's Age of Sigmar compared to Warhammer Fantasy?
Oh, it is like it's probably some of the highest fantasy I've ever seen. Yeah, I think like it's like there's like it's like
Age of Sigmar is just the Warhammer Fantasy world was destroyed, and then from that new realms formed.
Spoilers.
From
spoilers.
Spoilers from years ago. And from the magic coalesced into new realms, and now we have Age of Sigmar, which is just like thousands of years.
Same universe then.
Technically, yes.
But like and
It was kind of, think of it like a reboot, because at some point Games Workshop, obviously their sales were dwindling, and maybe because it was all square based stuff and rank and flank, I'm not sure. Maybe it's because the setting itself was no longer standing out, and that's what I mean by the whole generic thing. Like people who are hardcore into it could know the difference and could feel the alignment with that. But somebody new coming in, what's to draw them into that over D&D? Over
You just said alignment. Is that as significant in the game?
no. I mean like a person who just feels like that's part of their identity, right? Like I'm a Trekkie, or I'm a Star Wars nerd.
Does chaos exist in Warhammer Old World?
Absolutely.
That is one of the biggest things. That's one of the more unique things about the Warhammer Fantasy.
Question then.
Yeah.
Okay, does it differ? And if so, how does it differ from Warhammer 40K
It is
chaos?
almost identical.
See, I completely disagree with that.
Yeah.
I think that it started identical.
Yeah.
Because the old thought process was that the Warhammer Fantasy world, once they made Warhammer 40K, that the Warhammer Fantasy world actually existed in the universe of Warhammer 40K, but like in a warp storm or something like that.
Yeah.
And so technically, and like even things like Sigmar being a space marine or something.
No, he would have been one of the Lost Primarchs.
One of the
Or the Lost Yeah, he's one of the two Lost Primarchs.
Sigmar.
Yeah,
That's a
Sigmar. Yeah,
Theory.
Yeah,
One of the two lost Primarchs. For context, in Warhammer 40K, there's 20 Primarchs, 2 of which are unknown. And one of those theorized as Sigmar, who is who now in this universe?
He's an important dude.
We get to Sigmar. We'll get to Sigmar. He was like, he was a big deal in the setting.
Essentially founded the Empire.
Like the Human Empire, which is one of the biggest empires in the fantasy setting.
So he's human.
Founded it.
Yeah.
He's
human.
Yeah.
But putting that aside, all I'm trying to say is then over the years, I'm fairly certain that anybody at Games Workshop would say it's official canon that is not the case. That the Warhammer Fantasy world is nothing to do with Warhammer 40K, but it didn't start that way because it was just everything in 40K, at least a lot of things in 40K were just space versions of their fantasy setting. Like you could even look at like not everything, but a lot of things were just like even the Tomb Kings, which are like the Egyptian undead in Warhammer Fantasy. Then you have the Necrons, which are totally Egyptian undead, but they're machines.
Because
it's clearly just space Tomb Kings. Now, since then, and the more stories you write about anything, that's where you really make the difference. It's hard to just like always put one unique identifying trait. Like what's unique about Star Wars? Well, lightsabers. Well, you mean a force sword, like like these things that start off as an identifying trait over time get diluted. The lightsaber is no longer as cool as it used to be when it first came out, because now you've seen it a million times, and now you've seen it in all sorts of different forms, and you've seen enough lightsaber battles that you're no longer necessarily impressed by them. So you have that's why you have to keep. But if you deep dive into Star Wars lore, like forget whether you like the movies or whatever, if you really deep dive into all of it, you'll get into that universe, and to you it'll be a rich place filled with events and people and lore. So fantasy is the same way, but because I think just over time, because they're probably having a hard time pulling new people into it, even though you have like hit shows like Game of Thrones and all that keep fantasy alive, and Witcher, that people are going to this other IP for their fantasy.
True, yeah. There's a lot of.
So, and I'm sure there's a lot of different reasons they decided to do it. So when they destroyed Warhammer Fantasy to create Age of Sigmar, which is a totally new game,
very unique,
and if I personally think, and we're not going to get Age of Sigmar besides me just saying this, I've read many novels in there. I think it's a fantastic universe, but I wasn't really into Warhammer Fantasy lore at the time, and so it's hard for me to make a comparison. because I know that there's like the people, and it's hard. Like as you get older, if you've read 50, you've invested yourself in these universes. So it's hard to switch universes, right? Unless you've got a really compelling reason to get into a new universe. It's nicer to stay in the other one, even if it's not as good as some new one. It doesn't matter because to you, you are in it. You are invested. It's you. It's part of you. And so it takes like some monumental stuff. Like for me, maybe it's controversial here. Like I used to be a hardcore Star Wars fan, and I no longer am.
Why is that controversial?
I don't know, because some people are going to be like, "Well, what is Star Wars?" Right? Like I hated movies 8 and 9. The prequels were okay. 7 was okay.
Hate's
8.
a strong word.
I did, and it is a strong word, and it accurately represents. I don't like where they went with it. A lot of and then they started dumping out tons of TV shows, and I'm no longer an automatic Star Wars fan. If a Star Wars movie comes out now, I don't automatically decide to see it. If a Star Trek movie came out now, I'd still automatically see it because they haven't ruined it yet for me. Even though there's been a lot of bad shows and some bad movies, overall, I'm still a big Star Trek fan.
What's your favorite Star Trek movie?
Star Trek 6, Undiscovered Country.
Which one's that?
Undiscovered Country.
Sorry.
Oh, by far. By far. That was my childhood. I loved that movie so
It's
much.
brought back to Star Trek again. So many times.
Anyways. So bring it back to Warhammer Fantasy. Like if with them relaunching the old world and kind of shifting, they're going 250 years earlier than the current date that it was before. So
That's what's happening?
yeah, they're jumping back 250 years,
And there was,
which allows them to. It's a prequel to the.
It's
so they-
supposed to be like the Horus
think-
Heresy kind of thing.
I know. I don't know.
We have to say, Matt's wrong. Rathacon is 10,000 times better.
Oh, Rathacon.
Rathacon was great,
I thought First Contact was cool.
but if you're talking about
First Contact.
I've never seen a Star Trek movie.
Oh.
I love First Contact, but Undiscovered Country. Anyways, whatever.
Steppenwolf, man, when we're going
Are
up
we-
in the spaceship.
Fantasy.
Yeah,
So-
fantasy.
So should we do an episode on Star Trek? Even
We already have kind
there
of
is a Star Trek
inadvertently-
war game out there, I think, so it could be on brand to still talk to Star Trek lore. Anyway, so that's kind of my take on it. So I'll kind of stop talking about that specifically. But yeah, it's any lore can be fantastic if you get into it, and good stories have been written about it, and there's plenty of really good stories in Warhammer Fantasy.
The question was chaos in the old world.
Yeah, that's right. You go back to that. You go ahead.
Sorry,
Take it away.
I want to interject when you talked about that earlier because I had a question for you. One, so this is retcon lore, but back in the 90s, once 40K was taken off, you started to see Space Marines and bolt guns appear in the Warhammer Fantasy art in the background.
Yes.
Yeah.
Then there was a campaign.
Really?
Yeah.
Yes.
And there was a campaign.
Very vague, but yes.
And there was a campaign ran by Games Workshop in the very, very early 2000s. It might have been 1999. It might be 2000, 2001. It's called the Albion campaign. And
It's a legendary campaign.
yeah, it's about a island Albion. And at the end, a bunch of factions were awarded artifacts. And they would describe them, whatever. But they were so very clearly artifacts from the 40K universe. Like the High Elves won a suit of armor that, like, the way it was described, like you can only be on foot, you can't be mounted. It gave you 3-ups. It was power armor. Dark Elves got a power fist. It was stuff like that. So there was a time when canonically the Warhammer Fantasy world was in the greater universe, but now that's definitely not the case. It's clear as day. But I want to ask Matt, why did you say the chaos is different from the 40K?
I would say because of partly because of the way it's depicted. Partly, and obviously there's going to be a lot of similarities because they're all, it's Khorne, Tzeentch, Slaanesh, and Nurgle, just like in Warhammer 40K, and they all have the same traits and characteristics. So that way, you can immediately know what they are. But
We've read 40K novels that worship chaos entities, whatever, very differently than the rest of the greater chaos we hear about 40K.
so
I think canonically they are one and the same thing.
I think you can look at it if you're just looking at the entities of the 4 gods. Then yeah, they're pretty much the same, and their purposes and everything. But it's more like the treatment of what chaos is, not the gods themselves, but what chaos is. So in Warhammer 40K, and obviously I know more about the 40K than the fantasy, but I'll tell you what I know about fantasy in a second. In the 40K universe, we already talked about this in another segment, and so this won't be super beginner friendly. But you got like the Immaterium, which is the other dimension.
That is where it is a little different. Yeah.
Yeah, and chaos resides in the Immaterium.
Warp?
Warp, and that's where people can travel faster than light. That's where psychers connect to that and all that kind of stuff. Whereas in fantasy, and you could totally say it's the same thing, but to me it has a different flavor to it. You've got the winds of magic, which
is what
I know it could just be psychic powers, right?
No, it's what they call what they tap into.
Right.
Remember,
but
low
it still has Age of Sigmar, if you look at how Age of Sigmar works, this is okay. I guess my evidence that they're very different is Age of Sigmar, which is, no matter how much people may not like this, is Warhammer Fantasy lore.
Yeah.
It is.
It is.
It's canon that whatever they do in Age of Sigmar with the gods, that those gods are the same gods from Warhammer Fantasy. And in Age of Sigmar, there are 4 realms. There's a realm of chaos overall, and it's not exactly, but there's 4 realms for sure. Realm of Nurgle, Khorne, Tzeentch, and Slaanesh. And you can go to those realms.
That's all one realm?
No, they're each their own realm.
So this is
Realm of Khorne,
Age of Sigmar
which
lore
is
now.
Warhammer Fantasy lore. Whether you like it or not, it is Warhammer Fantasy lore because it tells us about the gods. So in one of the novels I read for Age of Sigmar, they went the Stormcast Eternals, which are the fantasy space marines, went down into the realm of Nurgle, and they actually managed to get to the lowest level, and they saw Nurgle. They actually saw Nurgle, who was enormous. Like, I don't mean like a great or unclean one enormous. I mean like city size, continent size, however you want to depict him. He's a real physical thing in the realm of Nurgle.
Because in 40K, the Chaos Gods are not physical.
You won't ever, I don't think you would ever see Nurgle beyond like in a vision. Like, you can't go find the place where Nurgle is. He's
in his garden.
Right. There is a place that they talk about, but I think it's more like a philosophical or spiritual way that you're not going to, and maybe I'm totally wrong with 40K, but I don't think you're going to be able to, you couldn't actually find Nurgle himself. And if you did, it's probably more a representation of Nurgle than an actual physical one. Whereas the Nurgle god in Age of Sigmar could just walk out, and it can't easily because of all the stuff that's going on, could walk out to the material plane if you want to look at it that way. So that's kind of where I know it's different. And so Warhammer Fantasy may have depicted them kind of similar, but Age of Sigmar has talked about them a lot more in a very real sense. And so that's where I can see that chaos is different, because a chaos demon in Age of Sigmar is not a reflection of our emotions.
That's what it is in Warhammer 40K.
In 40K, that's what they are.
What is it in
And
Age of Sigmar?
it's an actual soul. It's its own individual.
It's an actual soul.
Yeah, so like a plague bearer, for example, which in 40K
There's a Nurgle demon.
is a Nurgle demon, which is just an extension of Nurgle. He's a piece of Nurgle.
Which is one of the 4 Chaos Gods.
Yes.
The god of decay and entropy and
Right.
life and growth.
Right. Whereas in Age of Sigmar, that same plague bearer is an individual.
Not a reflection of anything else.
He's totally a reflection of Nurgle. He's totally kind of a part of Nurgle, just like we're all part of a family of the humankind, right? But we're still individuals. So we're not all kind of really part of the same consciousness. We're all just a same family. So that's more how it's depicted in Age of Sigmar. Souls can be changed. It's actually, well, now we're getting Age of Sigmar. This is where it's super cool.
But as you said, Age of Sigmar is
I know. But
Warhammer
they don't
Fantasy.
touch on the soul stuff as much in Warhammer Fantasy, where they can actually change one soul to another.
No, that's purely
That's
Sigmar
totally
thing.
Age of Sigmar
That's a
thing.
Sigmar
Is it just that aspect is the same, but really there are many differences between the two?
Oh, there's tons of differences, and I think that's why they chose to move on to a new IP, is so that they could start to just super differentiate from generic fantasy. And it would be hard. It would be possible to do that in Warhammer Fantasy without destroying the world, but it would be hard for people to see it as anything more than generic fantasy. And so I think that's how I know they're different.
I agree. Play devil's advocate for a second. Could you not? Is there any hard and fast lore in the 40K universe that you couldn't maybe extract some sort of soul from the Immaterium some way, or the tapping of a soul, and create it into another being in the 40K universe?
I don't know.
So
you mean
while I think
change a, because in Age of Sigmar you see, like, for example, a human captured by Sigmar, and then he's reforged into a Stormcast Eternal, which is a Space Marine, but not genetically, but literally the spirit is reforged, and they're unable to really. They're so loyal to Sigmar, partly because their soul has been reforged to do so.
We could see something like that happen in the 40K universe.
There is an example in the Horus Heresy books later on about someone who does do that. It's someone who is killed, their soul's brought back to
Right, but
life.
that's
a different person.
Okay.
Yeah, and that same soul then was captured by Nagash and reforged into an undead. And
Horus
then,
Heresy being not Warhammer 40K,
Yeah, well,
but also 10,000 years before the year
Yeah,
fourth
yeah.
40,000.
There's probably examples in 40K of that, but I can think of a heresy
so
example right
it's-
now,
So
yeah.
what you said, you're right. You're absolutely that. There's no everything Matt said was actually correct and right. I'm not like. But what I'm saying is, if tomorrow Games Workshop wanted to say, "Oh yeah, it's the same universe again,"
Oh, sure.
all you gotta do is like everything we're talking about in the Sigmar, the fancy stuff, is their interpretation of. Because we've seen plenty of worlds in the 40K universe, the Horus universe, that describe they're talking about chaos, but talking about it in a very different way.
Yeah.
So their interpretation of
Yeah.
you're right. It is a separate thing, but in a heartbeat, one sentence from Games Workshop could realign them. Like that's just they have the Sigmar universe has the special way of extracting souls and they found something that others haven't. But
Yeah, well, as the creators and caretakers of the 40K and Warhammer Fantasy and Age of Sigmar lore, they can do whatever they want to the detriment or positive aspect of it. Like we've seen that with other universes, right? A writer writes a bunch of novels and everybody loves them, and then they write the next one and they're like, "Ah, you ruined my childhood," right? Like we've seen that countless times. We've seen it with movies, video games, TV shows, books, and so yeah, they're the ones in charge.
One. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, Star Wars. I already talked about Star Wars. like Disney coming in and saying, "Oh, by the way, all that extended universe stuff, the hundreds and hundreds of books, they're no longer part of our universe."
And
Like
Star-
that.
and
And that felt like,
I wonder why they did that.
and I apologize if anybody who works at Disney who's a writer, but it felt very lazy, as a lazy way of not having to learn the universe and just be like, "We'll just make our own." And it's like, and that's not the way to do it. Don't ignore all your previous lore. You can retcon here and there, but don't ignore it.
Wouldn't that be nice to have so much lore? You can just like trim so much fat where you'd be like, we don't need that.
You
We don't need that.
can do it through retconning though, rather than just like wholesale.
Isn't that one massive retcon?
Yeah, it would be.
I know, except that you lose all your stuff rather than you don't gain anything.
don't
You start from
keep
scratch,
anything, yeah.
but the audience still expects you to kind of hold to some of that lore,
And then
you don't.
And then some people are kind of like in limbo where they still refuse to like. They still believe that stuff is part. Well, not that it's not, but that's a hard one, right?
Well,
Yeah.
it's more of just like, I mean, like using the Star Wars example of like, I like the expanded universe. I like the novels
Yeah,
more than I like the new stuff they
Knights
came
of
out
the Old
with. So
Republic. All that.
if I'm
stuff
gonna
is so
go
cool. Yeah.
absorb Star Wars stuff, it's
That's actually
probably
my
that way.
favorite. My favorite Star Wars is the Old Republic stuff by far. Like
Sure.
it's
Okay, back to Warhammer Fantasy
Yeah.
for just a moment.
For
Okay,
just a
so
moment, yeah.
chaos.
Until we go off.
You know what? Rightfully so. We're talking about chaos. Of course, we're going to go everywhere. So chaos exists. It sounds like it is rooted in the same as Warhammer 40K.
It's got a lot of.
Also, that it's similar with Age of Sigmar. Let's move on from there.
Oh, I did have one.
You're not allowed to, Dave.
Remember that?
You're not allowed to.
The chaos is pulling us too strong.
Was that what it was called, or Liber Chaotica?
So
whatever?
Lee had a very very cool book. It was
Lee, who used to be part of the MiniWarGaming team.
Yeah, he had a old. Do you remember the name of that book, Steve?
Well, I think
I
there was multiple ones.
look
There
it
was
up.
one for each of the gods, and I think there
Who
was,
is still with us, by the way. Lee's in our hearts.
Lee's over in Iceland right now.
yeah, no, okay, yeah. Just to
made it
clarify,
sound
like
like
you're
he was
saying it's so
dead.
weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, Lee is still currently alive.
Hey, man, he's in the warp. He's everywhere.
That's the Iceland is the warp. Yeah.
There was a publication that went into great details about chaos in the old.
I don't know if they
Was it called The Realm of Chaos?
No, I don't know if it's canon anymore, but it was essentially the mad writings of an imperial scholar who decided to go into the study of chaos a little bit. And as you read it, it's a very like methodical
Yeah, Liber Chaotica.
Liber Chaotic. It's a really well written like art study on chaos.
So it's an organized, orderly presentation on
But as
chaos?
you progress through the publication, it just devolves into extreme madness.
as he goes mad, because you can't not be.
It is
next to chaos
very,
and corrupt.
very
Yeah,
well
that's
done.
cool.
There's some cool stuff.
Yeah.
20 years ago, Games Workshop wrote everything from the point of view of basically humanity.
Yeah.
Whether it's 40K or fantasy. And that's just an amazing example of like storytelling through the
But
narrative.
what I wanted
That's awesome.
to tie into this was I'm almost certain towards the end of the publication he tries to go into details about these physical beings he comes across, referencing like the physical entities of Nurgle, Khorne, Slaanesh, or Tzeentch, like them as a being. Also, it ties into 40K lore where he like it's like Madden scribbles essentially in the book, but like in the silhouette of the scribble you can clearly see an Emperor's Children Marine.
Yep.
And like things like that. Yeah.
And this was old world Warhammer Fantasy?
This is
It's like
Warhammer
maybe
Fantasy stuff,
this
yeah.
is like 5th edition, 6th edition fantasy, so it'd be like circa 2000 to 2005.
And you see an Emperor's Children,
Very
which
clearly.
is from the Warhammer 40K.
Because he had said like
Universe.
these he was part of a battle going on. He was like documenting a battle, and then these he thought they were angels descending to the battlefield, but they showed up and started killing everybody.
So they were angels of death?
Yeah.
Weird. I mean, yeah, just
Which is another name for Space Marines?
And he was trying to go into details about the weapons they bared, and like he couldn't conceive them because they
That's
were
it right here. That.
That's one of them. Yeah. Well, it's more of a. It was like what I remember is like a.
What image are we looking at?
Correct. That is the one.
I know.
Yeah.
What image are we looking at right
I'm
now?
trying to pull up something that maybe we can show. Is this the one that you're talking about though? Before I send it off to Steve.
So as they're trying to find that stuff, I guess one of the easier explanations too is if you look at 40k stories, you know how sometimes there's a warp portal
one
that
looks
opens
like
up, the
a
demons come
world
through
Yep.
in 40k.
Yep.
But
So
does that
in the
look
Warhammer
like this
Fantasy
guy's
setting,
100%, yeah,
it's the
that's
North
that
and
same
South Pole
publication.
permanently have portals that are open.
I'm gonna
In the Warhammer Fantasy.
In the Warhammer Fantasy setting, yeah, the North and South Poles, that's the realm of chaos.
Yeah.
So imagine, so I guess if you wanted to take like a 40k planet and say, yeah, there's permanent warp portals open here and here,
That's kind of
with
what.
chaos coming through, chaos would be a lot more prevalent there.
Yeah.
So that might be similar to what it would look like in the 40k universe.
Yeah.
If there was a permanent, like, here's,
Are you saying Santa Claus is chaos?
it could
Do you have
be.
your email.
So it was.
There's a big bad equivalent to Abaddon, whatever his name is in
Abaddon.
40K. So there's Archaon in
Archaon.
in the fantasy
yeah.
setting, but he's actually super cool and gets stuff done.
There was a.
As opposed to not getting stuff done in another setting?
Yeah.
Archeon was a much more successful Abaddon, essentially.
Hey, if you
And
want to,
Abaddon being the dude in 40k who tries to do stuff that's perceived as bad.
Yeah, the big bad chaos guy. Yeah.
that's very political, Dave.
That's very 8-year-old brain, Matt.
Yeah. Now Steve wants to show a picture, but he can't when you keep switching the cameras. It takes over the computer.
Are you sure this is what Steve wants? Because I don't hear Steve saying this.
No, he said it to me.
That's how you know that's what Steve wants, is when he's not.
Yeah, he
saying.
tells it through me, through somebody else.
Like,
Okay, let's show the image. Let's show the image.
it'll take me a couple minutes.
That's fine. Just let me
Take
know
me a
when you're
couple
ready.
minutes.
Yeah.
You didn't have it ready?
No, I have to. Okay.
But that's
Stop pressing buttons.
when they were tying
Okay,
in.
so in other words, don't put it on you because you are searching for the screen and it's
Well,
screen
no, don't press
captured.
that. When you press buttons, you take over his keyboard.
Go to main. Go to main.
Yeah.
Okay, there you go.
Then don't touch.
All right, we're on one camera.
But
Right? My ADHD is going to be stalled until that happens.
And then you'll press the button really
Controlling the
fast.
camera from here.
Do you
So
want me to hold on to that? For
No.
you? Okay.
no, that's no good either.
Are you like queuing it up so like when he gives you back control, you just be like switch.
Yeah.
Switch.
There's going to be 88 switches. Okay, it's going to
It's like
happen.
everybody, please get your barf bags ready.
So I don't even know what he's looking up.
He's getting the picture that was of where the Liber Chaotica that shows a space marine in the fantasy lore.
Oh, okay.
this is back when it was like.
Because I was showing it here, and you're like, "Oh, we got to see it."
It was like
All right,
very
well, here we go.
confirmed that they were connected. Like it was a planet
can remember his password.
covered in a warp storm because it was very heavily influenced by chaos because they like on both polar ends. It's where chaos kind of met.
What's a warp storm?
Also, that's where it ties into 40.
Is that a magic storm?
No, a warp storm would be like in your galaxy, in your solar system. There is it's a magic. It's an immaterial.
It's basically a space magic storm. If
Yeah,
you want to get
it's
into
where-
It's a
like,
space magic storm,
It's a
right?
space magic
when
storm.
Matthew
Yeah.
talked about the warp, it's where the warp spills into our reality, and it's where
Okay.
they mingle together.
And that's where demons come out?
Yes,
Okay.
that's where they exist. That's how you go to the warp. That's where you can. What?
And that's the North and South Pole, and Santa Claus is chaotic.
Yes.
All right. Steve's having a hard time. Steve, stop trying to remember
Here, give it to me.
your email.
Pass it here, and then we can show it.
It'll be closer. On,
This won't
on
go
Dave.
poorly.
Yeah, I'm not.
Steve,
There
that
we
whole
go.
time, Steve, are you saying the whole time you didn't even get it?
He was trying to figure out his password for his email.
Oh.
Turns out you know what? That's not bad. I think people can see that. Okay. So this is part of the page.
So it's not
I
reflecting
know,
on
I'm
it.
trying to see that. I'm showing the right-
Yeah, that's probably
So
good too.
it's only part of the page, but you can see. I'll show you, Dave. After.
It looks good.
That's one of the scribbles. There was a
But
bunch
you
in that
can
book.
see clearly.
Yeah.
What is this scribble?
This is the Liber Chaotica from the 20 years.
Yeah, that's an Emperor's
So
Shield.
this is-
That actually looks like
I'm seeing the Chaos Gods.
that looks like Lucius the Eternal, which is a character in
you could
Emperor's
see
Children.
you could see the pipes on the office coming off his
Yeah,
power
and so
the doom sirens on his power armor.
for context, that is Emperor's Children is one of the 20 legions of Space Marines. A Space Marine is a superhuman in the far future, which is at least 30,000 years from now. So Emperor's Children belongs in the 40K universe, and this is a publication of Warhammer Fantasy.
I can't remember when it came out. Though.
Where it was depicted, which is actually kind of cool.
Right.
So that, did I understand that correctly?
So yeah,
Basically, yeah.
That's when they were hard confirming that they were all connected. Like the old.
Is this before 40K existed?
No.
This
This is like
is well into
40K is well
existing.
established at this point. We're talking like probably like
But then
third
I-
edition, fourth edition 40K.
So I don't know if
point.
Games
Yeah.
Workshop ever came out and said like, "Oh wait, never mind, that's not canon anymore." I think they just stopped talking about
I
it.
think it's still canon.
Well, when you write as many books as they do, and you're going through as many editions, and you're doing a lot of games, It's fun to tie them all together.
Yeah.
And then at some point,
I
it's
have
just
more
like,
fun
this
that
is
way.
too much to remember.
That's fair.
What's what?
Are there not over
every
500
every
books?
novel, like every artist, sorry, every writer, every artist, every rules designer, every lore writer has to. They must have some sort of reference, like a wiki, an internal wiki or something.
Continuity Bible is what it's
Yeah, a
called.
continuity Bible, like an internal wiki or however they do it, that has to be maintained. So like when Dan Abnett writes a new novel, somebody then needs to go and update all the new lore he created, because he creates new lore all the time.
But isn't that what fans are for? Because that's what the wikis are.
No, this is an internal one.
Yeah.
Internal wiki that
Because
only
there
the
might-
writers have access to?
Right, because it'll have spoilers.
This is theoretical. We haven't.
No, it's not. There's no way that Games Workshop doesn't have one.
No way.
I'm not saying, I'm not confirming anything that anybody's told me, but there's no way. There's no way that is with as many books as they create in lore and rules they come out with, that if they don't have this, then they should have this.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's a good assumption.
They 100% do.
They've
I don't-
got to.
They could not keep up. They would, and I know they constantly contradict themselves.
Well, they have so many books. It's hard not
which
to,
is
they?
which is fine. It's more the artist, just like an author having to know everything in order to not contradict some other
There's
author.
no author with like 3-6 books in a series that hasn't contradicted himself, and that's just one author.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay.
So-
now that we're leaving chaos.
Yeah.
Just for a
Wait,
moment.
I just have one. I'm kidding.
We could like go into other.
Hey, we're gonna go like this, okay? It's gonna be all madness.
Yeah,
we
we
all
could,
madness.
we
wanna
could
talk about
quickly
Warhammer
bomb
Fantasy?
through the other factions in fantasy. that
Okay,
make
so
it
how many
unique.
factions are there in the old world?
Well, the
Playable factions on the tabletop.
so we'll go
In the new old world or the old world?
old world.
Whatever.
So you have
Whichever one I can play. How about that? Whichever one is playable right
there's
now.
about 18. Well, there's 15 playable factions. No, 6. I'll say 16 because chaos.
That's a lot of factions to get into if I'm brand new.
Yep. There's like
But
you
they're
have-
all they all aesthetically will stand out. Like if I put them all in front of you and you knew nothing about them, you'd probably pick your favorites right away.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay,
Yep.
so let's break it down that way then.
Yeah.
yeah. But by your favorites?
By
Oh.
well, chaos is at the top of that list.
Yeah, so you have
Flavor.
So
you have 3 different flavors of
Yes.
chaos. Yeah.
Corn. Yes.
That's not what I meant.
No,
Oh,
you have
It's
your
what
you have
I heard.
You can represent the demons of chaos on the battlefield when they manifest in the old world. You can play pure demons. You could play the worshippers of chaos, essentially like the Norskins.
the
I'd like
Warriors
to say.
of Chaos.
And then there's the warriors of chaos, which are
So-
like
Okay.
Those are Chaos Space Marines.
those are like
If we're
the
going to compare to something that you
full-fledged-
know,
They're gifted
40K
by
Chaos
chaos. They're
Okay, so
bigger,
Warriors of Chaos
stronger.
are basically chaos based. So let's upgrade there. Let's say I'm a 40K player, but I'm not a fantasy player.
Right.
And if I were to get into fantasy, I would say Warriors of Chaos are basically your chaos based marine equivalent.
100%. Yeah. They have demon princes. They have giant
Nice.
dudes
Even
Clad in
the
full
regular
plate armor.
guy is like, yeah, he's in full armor.
These
Like,
are the-
heavily armored.
These are the best fighters on the planet.
Agreed.
They no one can go toe to toe with them.
Well, there is, and technically there wouldn't be a Space Marine equivalent unless you want to look at like Bretonnia, because Bretonnia is all the knights.
Yeah, but
they're all the knights in shining
Okay,
armor.
knights in shining armor,
Yeah,
but so
that's
do they
Bretonnia.
have horses?
Yes, that's
they,
a big
they
part. Men
are
at
your
arms, knights.
Arthurian knights. Bretonnian or Arthurian.
Arthurian
Okay,
knights.
I think
French-
we gotta go
French
back and give
Arthurian
other
knights.
Chaos factions they do though, because we got to talk about Beastmen.
There's
There's Beastmen.
I'm sorry. Okay, beasts are what kind of beasts?
so they
They're beast men.
They're Beastmen.
they're the
Are they
they're-
bulls?
Some of them
Bull
are.
boars.
They're so the game doesn't depict them in their true fashion because they're like mutants that have banded together and they are the children of chaos. Yeah. So like
Mutants.
so
like X-Men?
this is a unique thing to Warhammer Fantasy is that there are common mutations because of the influence of chaos.
That's very much 40K too, my dude.
No, I mean unique to fantasy as in like outside of Tolkien fantasy.
my bad.
Yeah. Like
Okay,
it's
okay.
like a
All
you
right.
can be born as a human and then through effectively deeds that you wouldn't consider worship to chaos, but like say you're trying like say Slaanesh as an example. You're trying
Slanesh
to-
being one of the 4 gods of
Yeah,
chaos.
say you're trying to better yourself as a person. Maybe your ego is a little high, and maybe
Definitely high.
Maybe you're stepping on a few throats to get up and above. You might develop a few mutations because you're
Like an extra tentacle.
you're worshiping chaos without
What kind of tentacle?
one that makes you
Depends.
more perfect at what you're trying to accomplish, right?
Yeah. Think about that for a
So I
second.
was gonna say, so yeah.
I am thinking about that.
And then beyond Beastmen, you got Chaos Dwarves.
You'd have chaos dwarves, yep, which are kind of weird because they don't really worship the gods of chaos, but they're
Okay. All right. So hold on.
Yeah.
What you're saying is, I'll just sum it up because this is what I'm understanding. There's many flavors of chaos.
yes, Skaven.
No. But yes.
You
but-
said a word, Skaven.
Yeah. So
That sounds very ratty to
don't
me.
exist.
Are Skavens a rat race?
Yeah, Skaven are they're actually a cursed human race. They're
Skavens are human.
they used to be.
How are
Kind
you
of.
making that claim?
That's one of
Well,
their
that's
old
one of the
Bell?
origin stories of
The
where
Bell,
the Skavens
yeah.
came about
That
to
may
be.
not be their origin.
One of the origin stories.
I guess that's true. Yeah,
I think that's the only like unified one, but I don't think they ever confirmed that they're corrupted team. But yeah, there's a rat empire that lives under the surface of the earth,
the entire
Like the whole
planet.
Earth.
the entire planet.
the whole Earth, no
billions,
less.
billions and billions and
Yeah,
billions.
they
of them.
infest everywhere.
Billions of rat men,
But
people.
they keep their existence secret from the surface because anytime someone goes a little too deep, they have like assassin nests and everything.
But
Yeah.
you're telling me about them. It's not so much of a secret anymore.
Well, I mean, we're
Well, we're more like a top-down view.
yeah, we see everything.
We see everything. Yeah.
and who is we?
The players? Are we? Is that we're going that noob with the players?
Yes, it needs to be.
Who's
Are we
the
talking
player?
about the chaos?
And who-
gods
and
here?
who's the player?
Humans see everything.
The
or
person
us
who
as
plays the
players?
game. What's a game? It's a fun thing you do. What's a do? It's an action. What's an action?
There's
Something
actually-
you can do in D&D.
Hey, are we still in chaos? We just don't even know we are.
Do you want a rapid fire of every single faction?
Yes.
So I'll say a faction, and
What
and
makes
you
it
had
unique?
no, you have to within less than a sentence. So not a full sentence. What makes them unique? And it don't take
That's
too
it.
long.
All right.
How about one word?
That might be hard.
3 words. That's it.
Okay,
Max.
lizardmen
dinosaurs.
riding dinosaurs.
Yep, they're literal.
That's 3 words.
They're,
That's
they're
definitely 3 words.
bipedal dinosaurs that ride dinosaurs.
Yeah,
They,
Nice,
They,
lizardman.
they save the earth from the demons.
Skaven.
Yep. Cursed rat people. Children of chaos.
Oh, that's way
Nice.
Too long.
Sorry.
We got
Underground
enough
rat
chaos. I think we understand.
Ogres.
The best.
That's actually hard to explain.
No,
That's a lot of words.
that's way too long. Big mercenaries who like to eat.
No.
No,
They-
not
they
all of
are-
them are
That's Age of
mercenaries.
Sigmar, right?
You know, okay. Here's a better one, Matt. I tell you what. Say a name. I tell you what I think it is, knowing nothing, and then
All
you
right.
guys correct
Well,
me.
some of them you should be able to get really easily. Orcs and goblins.
Greenskin, fun.
All right.
Best.
Tomb Kings
Ooh.
Skeleton dudes that are royal
from Egypt.
from Egypt.
Yeah. What else?
Elves in the woods.
Yeah.
My elves.
Pretentious elves in the woods.
Not quite necessarily in the woods.
On an island.
Oh yeah, they wouldn't be in the woods. Forget that. They would be like probably in the clouds.
They live in like an Atlantis equivalent.
Yeah.
Yeah, I knew it. At some place that's like ethereal.
And that nobody else is allowed to come to.
Well, of course not.
Yeah. Let's see. What else we got? We got vampire counts.
Blood sucking humanoids.
Well, it's an undead army led by vampires.
Cool. They're undead. Do they have skeletons too?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice. Can they raise from the dead?
Absolutely.
They are masters of necromancy.
Yeah. So it's more like the vampires are in charge and you're mainly fighting undead. But there are some other things in there.
There's a lot of well-developed lore about the vampires and
Bretonia.
Yeah.
Knights in shining armor.
Yep.
French. Knights.
Arthurian.
French.
In France.
Come on.
Or
Get it
French.
right.
Not in France, but France.
Empire.
That would sound like it would be the same thing. I don't know. I have no idea.
The Empire's kind of hard to describe. They're
No,
like
it's not.
regular people.
It's not
Regular
German
people.
the regular human faction.
Yeah, they're like the Holy Roman Empire.
Yeah, sure.
Renaissance era.
Right, yeah, it's just
Renaissance.
Renaissance
the regular
German
it's the
humans.
regular
Yeah,
human.
they're kind of
faction.
Germans. Yeah.
Okay, so
I'm gonna get
I'll
butchered
be
in
an
the comments
8-year-old.
over everything I'm saying.
I'll be an 8-year-old when it comes to history, okay? Because that's not far off.
Yeah.
So when you say German people that are in fantasy times,
Germans from like 500 years ago.
okay, from Germania. I remember seeing the beginning of Gladiator.
just
Germania.
think medieval people.
They look kind of look like Vikings.
That's too far back.
That's quite
They
far
kind of
back.
look like Vikings,
That's way too far back.
That's really far back.
right? So that's my reference.
They-
So I don't know what
There's
that
a bunch
looks
of
like.
different provinces that don't necessarily always get along.
Do they get along with the Bretonnians?
So Europe.
They don't get along with each other. So sometimes they do, sometimes they don't.
Yep.
All right, that was way more than 3 words. Dark elves.
Ooh.
elves that like to party.
Yep. That's a dang good way of saying it. Yep.
Nice.
We don't like that.
Dwarfs. And it is dwarfs, not dwarves.
Dwarves who have like
Dwarfs.
Dwarfs. There's an F. It's
Okay,
not
hold
VE.
on. Dwarfs.
Dwarfs.
Dwarves.
Not dwarves.
This is always the contentious one.
No,
So,
it's not
okay,
dwarfs.
definitely
Old
we got
English.
grudges over the V versus F.
Short people who have grudges.
Short people.
I think
Short
that's important.
humans?
No, I don't think
They're not short. Everybody else is just tall. What are you
Everyone
talking
else
No,
about?
Tall,
dwarves
yeah.
are their own. It's just like elves are not just tall humans. They're
That's
elves.
going in the
Yeah,
book.
dwarves are like the complete own.
Short humanoids.
Yeah.
Who have
Okay,
grudges?
they got grudges though. I remember that bit.
Yeah.
And there's like the Shadow
Master-
Oath. What's it called?
Slayer.
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 They're master-
Okay.
Kislev.
Ooh.
Kislev.
Kislev.
A jokester race?
No, we are from the north.
They're
Oh, Hold on. Are they
Kislev.
Vikings?
No.
The North French.
Oh, okay.
We are from the north.
I think that they're not Vikings the way you're thinking about them. They might be closer to like actual Vikings though.
But isn't it
Yeah,
just
that's fair.
Okay, hold on.
Yeah,
I play
they're like-
The Witcher. Where in The Witcher would it be similar?
like a Novgorod kind of thing.
Russia.
I like the Russian part of The
Russia.
Witcher.
Oh, okay. All right. Russian Vikings.
Effectively, yeah. They're actually
kind of
probably
based
one
off
of
the
the
Wing
tightly
Hussars,
close
but-
tied to European history more than anything else, realistically. Because like the Vikings would go over to what we know as Russia now, and that is exactly what Kislev is.
They are the first line of defense for humanity against the Northern Wastes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what? This is perfect because all the other names seem like they're pretty easy to figure out without knowing much. But this
what-
one is like I have no clue what that is.
Weird.
Kislev's weird.
It
'cause
needed more explanation.
It's kind of part of the Empire, but it has its own unique name. So
They're allied with the Empire.
they're allied with the Empire, yeah.
Do they always ally with them? Or?
They kind of always get along with the Empire in the sense that they have to, and the Empire kind of has to have them there as a buffer.
Well,
How do they feel about having to be there?
There's blocking between the Empire and the Chaos Wastes. So the Empire's
Gondor.
incentivized.
You
to
said
keep
chaos.
them
I'm
going.
listening.
Yeah.
So the Empire's constantly setting up supplies. Just hold off the chaos. We don't want to send our soldiers, but yeah.
Yeah.
That's all the main ones.
Okay.
There are
main
lots.
ones.
There's
Do you know what that? Okay.
There's
That's
lots of sub factions and stuff.
so. When it comes to like mythical creatures, like do dragons exist in fantasy?
Absolutely. Yep. There is a lot.
So in what faction would I find dragons?
The elves
Depending
manipulate
on
the
which
dragons
time
the
period
most.
You're talking about actually.
Yeah.
elves. So it wouldn't be that lizard race you're talking? It wouldn't be lizard.
No,
men?
they ride dinosaurs.
They straight up giant dinosaurs.
Oh.
Straight up.
Yeah, like it's a
massive dinosaurs.
Because in
stegosaurus,
my mind, there's definitely a
a
difference.
raptor.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, so it's
Yeah.
elves. Okay, so elven dragons.
yeah. Well, it's more like elves riding dragons.
Yep.
The chaos likes to manipulate dragons too, though. Chaos dragons, two-headed
Obviously.
dragons, and everything. Yeah, mutated dragons. Yeah, that's cool.
I don't think in Bretonnian Empire you don't have any dragon.
They're
riders, do you?
old lord.
The
that used to
Empire
be.
does have
Close
dragons, but
combat.
it's-
Close
I
combat.
mean, like units on the table though.
I'm thinking corn.
Yeah, the Empire
okay?
can take a dragon.
Not anymore. So there was a point in the gaming history where just what every faction could have access to dragons.
Yeah.
They slowly got moved away to like just the elves
Or died, and the elves could keep raising
but there
them.
is
Yeah.
still one dragon in
the
the
bestiary.
Empire.
In the Imperial Zoo.
It's the Imperial Dragon Carl in modern 8th edition fantasy. There's still one dragon, Karl Franz's personal dragon in the Imperial Zoo, but no longer rules on the table or on the table.
So going
That's
back.
very good echoes of the past.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so question
I
then.
feel like we've done like 2 or 3 segments now.
Question. If I like Chaos Corn, for instance, which I do, and that's what I play in 40K, what would I enjoy most playing in the old world?
Do you like the demons or the Chaos
High
Space
elves.
Marines?
I like Chaos Space Marines.
Yeah, hi.
So then, yeah, you'd play you'd play Warriors of Chaos.
Yeah, Warriors
And they're
Chaos, hands down.
worshippers of corn. They get the mark of corn. And the coolest thing about the worshippers of corn is that their first gift from corn is that he fuses their armor to their flesh. Yep.
That's a good thing.
That's a gift. Yeah.
How do you go to the
It
bathroom?
sounds like a gift.
Yep. That's just that you're gifted chaos armor by corn, which is your flesh becomes the chaos armor. Which is like it's full plate armor, it's head to toe.
Nice.
You're armored head to toe. Yeah.
Sweet.
Thick plate. Yeah.
So, and if you look at the 40K idea that, you know, the Space Marines are these genetically modified humans, when you look at Warriors of Chaos, these are just basically your really tough guys from the north.
Yeah.
So
Bigger,
like you have
stronger than
to,
the rest, yeah.
yeah, you have to, you live a pretty tough life by the time that you manage to get to adulthood. And then they just take that and they crank that up.
Yep. You in addition to your gifts, you are like you're kind of blessed with extra strength. You become a little bit physically bigger. Some much bigger. There's different examples of it, but yeah.
So
They're
yeah,
almost like a separate species of human.
They're human, but they're quite a bit more.
Are they giant?
not really. So if you lean into earlier you were talking about Vikings, the kind of like cartoon idea of Vikings of being these giant hulking warriors.
Do they
from
have
the
horn
north.
helmets?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's those are your Norse.
Do they have spikes on their armor?
Everywhere.
Absolutely everywhere. Yep.
Nice.
Not chaos if you don't have spikes.
Like a Nurgle worshiper might be bloated by Nurgle as a gift, and he'd be bulking and huge and like stand like 9 feet tall and like 8 feet wide kind of thing, right? Yeah,
It's a circle.
yeah, just like a circle. Yeah. But he'd be covered head to toe in plate armor as well, right? Yeah.
If I like magic, casting magic,
Tiles.
you think high elves would be the
lizardmen.
Ooh, okay. I never would
toad.
expect lizards and dinosaurs to have magic.
They're parallels. They both share.
To be fair, Nurgles.
I was gonna say, like, if you look at magic users, because obviously there's a bunch of strong ones, but I think lizardmen still, like, the slan should be at the top, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
narratively, there are a tier of magic users that are above the rest. It's techless and the second generation slan.
What's
Yeah.
techless? That's a weird word.
A very powerful.
He's an elven wizard lord.
Yeah.
Elven wizard
Yeah.
lord.
Yeah.
Like,
Sounds important.
Elven wizards tend to be very, very powerful. Techless is a cut above.
Yeah.
But also there's a generation of slan. These are the frog leaders of the lizardmen.
Slan.
The older they are,
They're space people. They have spaceships.
This is where fantasy gets
Technically,
weird.
but
They have
that's getting
spaceships,
deep.
and they actually are. They went to this world to protect it against chaos.
Yep.
Because this world was so enraptured by chaos, existing in the warp. The Slan are connected to the
trying to
old
shut down
ones.
the warp.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're connected to the old ones. The old ones exist in fantasy and 40k.
Remember
They
we
do.
talked,
The
remember
old
we
ones.
talked about the old ones in the 40k lore. And
Yeah.
I think the Slan are directly connected to the old
Yeah.
ones.
Yep.
The Slan are
They're not the old ones, but they are essentially.
They're old frogs.
As in, like, the first spawning of the slan. Because I think in 40k, like, nobody really ever met the old ones that exist anymore, but the first spawning, and I think maybe even, I don't know, second spawning, like, they would have met the old ones. They would have encountered, they would have interacted.
I wasn't gonna say, but so pure spec. In my head, I seem to remember that the slan at one point actually were the old ones canonically.
At one point, I
That
think
was-
canonically
okay.
they were.
That
Yeah.
was at one point, yeah. But I think they changed it to they were created by the old ones. And like that, as a creator race, they made the Slan.
Okay,
Yeah.
so the old ones,
Not a great creator.
the old ones are the creators of the universe. Who are the old ones?
Maybe.
I don't think it was.
They're vague.
I don't think it was creators of the universe, but they were one of the first races to kind of exist. So they're the ones that directly are opposing chaos.
Because if you're introducing spaceships in a fantasy setting, it goes beyond this world.
That's why it's connected. That's why it's, I believe, still connected to the 40k world. Because even at the end of the fantasy existence, you had examples of the lizardmen literally getting into their spaceships that were these Aztec/Mayan like pyramids that just lifted from the surface of the planet and just left.
Well, there is pyramid tech that we don't know about.
Sure.
And like I think it's Sumerians who are like lizards depicted as lizards and glyphs. And so it's like, oh, yeah, that's a slant.
But just to clarify, it's not like they, and again, you guys might know specific examples. It's not like the lizardmen were flying around in spaceships in fantasy. If you go back to their origin stories of how they ended up there, it alludes to it. And at the very end of fantasy,
They took
confirm
off,
it.
so yeah, it's not like they were flying around spaceships.
Well,
all the time.
once they were there to seal off the rift, hold back chaos.
They
They
were-
failed. They're like, okay, we're leaving now.
Well, if you go to old lore though, the old ones created all the races on the earth too.
Yes.
They created humans, dwarves, elves.
The old ones created all the humans
they
on
did.
the
The
earth.
old, yeah, if we want to look at that, it's simply because not a lot is said about them, so it's more like fragmented information. Essentially, they are an omnipotent spacefaring race that have seeded the galaxy with intelligent life.
They're a level 2 civilization.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yep.
Level 3, maybe.
Level 3, maybe we don't know.
Yeah, full galaxy
I
wide.
guess
Yeah.
we don't know.
Well, they could, yeah, but their
Yeah.
power is very unknown. So their
Yeah,
capabilities.
it's basically they're the gods of fantasy and 40k essentially.
So,
But not
the
worshipped.
Worlds are a link between the two worlds. And if we're going to talk about spaceships, this goes back to the earlier part of this video about 40 minutes ago, where almost an hour ago, where the connection between the old world and the fantasy world would. So another piece of evidence is once the Slan were taken off in their pyramid spaceships, the Skaven built a radio.
Yeah.
And
The rat people
The rat people, and they
who live in secret,
they were talking to the Eldari.
Oh, they did.
who are
Yeah.
I did
space
not know that.
elves.
Yeah,
Ardari
40K,
being
yeah.
space elves in 40.
And now this is just before the world exploded and separated a bunch of realms. But Games Workshop, a bunch of
So
hints again. Hey,
it's-
it's
yeah,
a
that's-
planet in the universe, and also we just blew it up.
Yeah, it's end time stuff. So that's kind of their last hurrah for it. And
Okay, here's a question. The world that takes place in the Warhammer Old World fantasy setting, is that Earth?
It doesn't have a name.
No.
No, you can't.
If they are linked, if we are to look at fantasy and 40k as linked, then it is definitely not Earth, because we know where Earth is in 40k, which is Earth, is Terra.
Terra, yeah.
Also,
So Earth exists in 40k then.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's Terra.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's called Terra.
It's our galaxy, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think the question
Our
is a different
history.
way. It's clear at the time of writing, when the 40k universe isn't even a concept. It is the old world is a past version of Earth that's so long ago it's all forgot.
Like even before, like
Well, it's clear if you look at the map.
The map looks. It has a very.
It's Earth.
It's
But,
a strong resemblance.
You have 30 years of lore writing and building a new universe and then filling it up with lore.
I see.
And
You know
things
what?
are gonna
It's like
change,
in
but-
Batman Forever when Gotham City has the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like that. Yeah. So it's like not Earth, but it is Earth, but it's not because it's Gotham City.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah. And if they were in the same universe, then it definitely is not Earth, because we already know where Earth is.
definitely a lot of parallels though. And it's
Well-
never really identified on the galactic map either. It's not like here's where all that fantasy stuff is.
if you look at the layout of it as well, like, are you good at geography? Not really.
You know what? Let's
Okay.
assume not.
So you're not good at geography. If I had you draw the map of like our Earth, and then we just, because it's not going to be 100%
I
accurate.
did that when
But
I
you
was 12 to create my own risk board, so I'm excellent at it.
So yeah, so imagine you did that, and then we just changed the names of stuff, and that's probably.
So we're playing
close
Risk
to what
now.
the,
Okay.
What the
Yeah.
fantasy
It's
world
like-
actually looks like.
You
Yeah,
wouldn't
okay.
even if I just showed you the map of the old world with no names on it or anything, like, oh, that's like a weird kind of off looking Earth.
Yeah.
Like
So-
it's almost identical.
Sorry, it's the known world. Thank you.
World. Yeah,
The
sorry.
The old world is just
Yeah.
where Warhammer Fantasy mainly takes
Yeah.
place.
It's like the European
which is the
continent.
Empire, and
Yeah.
no, not even the full continent. It's just
The
the
old
end.
world could be a copy and paste, like a mirror version of Terra in the warp.
True.
It's not
Sure.
exactly
Yeah.
clear that the old world's not in the warp.
Yeah, that's true.
Don't go anywhere. This is not the end of the video. This is a sponsored segment, which happens to be self-sponsored because we're promoting our own game that we are developing, which is Ravaged Star, the tabletop miniature war game. We're developing the rules for it. Take a look at this range of miniatures that you get. This is super awesome, super detailed, and we are excited because this is where we're at. In the 16 years we've been doing the channel, we are now here. We are right here. And bang! Ah! There's noises all over the place. It's chaotic in nature, and it's exactly where we want to be. There's a link below in the description for the GameFound campaign, so you can late pledge to get whatever you want. Get everything if you want to. There's a lot of miniatures that you could dive into. This is a new tabletop gaming experience. Now back to the Maelstrom.
Nerding out with the old world. Wow, that's cool. I actually want to get this. Did you see that, Steve?
I gotta fix the camera.
Yeah, probably.
No, I can't remember.
So nerding out, let's just go like
How many of
this-
those cards do
if
you
you
have?
have played Warhammer Fantasy and you got into it in the past and you're getting back into it, or you're semi-new, or you're not new and you're just ready to go, we're going to nerd out a little bit here. We're going to talk about directions where we hope it's going to go, things we hope to experience on the tabletop and in the lore, and we'll just go wherever it goes, wherever the Maelstrom of War takes us. Let's dive right in. What's the first thought that comes to your brain? What do you hope to expect in the experience of the old world?
Well, lots of support. Hopefully.
You mean lots of new stuff?
new stuff? Keep the narrative books rolling. That's a great the great start. That's just make that the main focus, honestly, just narrative books.
Story.
Anything else can just not as important, I think.
Well, here's an interesting thing that I found when I was reading through and prepping for our old world content. So the
You know
The
where he's
art-
going. You know where
Exactly
the
where we're
arcane
going.
journal thing,
Yeah,
where it ends with the scenario.
100%.
Yes. Okay. So in the past, I'm going to say something they've done in the past for 40k, Age of Sigmar, all that kind of stuff, is that they'll give you a narrative book. They'll be like, here's a bunch of cool things that happened, and then here's some scenarios to recreate those things that happened. I've never liked those. I've never once enjoyed those because
Why not?
I'm not going to recreate it. If I put my models on the table exactly the same way that you said it and I roll dice, it's going to be different.
That's true. It's like it's a historical wargaming at that point.
Yeah, and I don't really like historical stuff, and it's funny because it's not like I don't like historical because of the time period. I want to tell my own stories. I don't want to recreate the same stories. So in this one, when I was reading through it in the Arcane Journal, and we've already put up the battle report for it, and I actually don't even know how it's going to go because we haven't filmed it yet. That's the wonderful order of filming.
Yeah.
But in that, it describes the so this is 250 years before Warhammer Fantasy present day,
Before
8th edition.
before 8th edition, which was the last edition of Warhammer Fantasy.
before the end times, well before.
So
it,
this is before the end times.
well before it. Yeah.
This is 250 years before the end times kind of kicked off.
The Empire is
Don't worry about
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Don't worry about that.
yeah.
So in the Arcane Journal, it described how Bretonnia, which is those knights and everything, the French knights, the French Arthurian knights, they sent a crusade down into
Araby.
Araby?
Basically to Egypt, if you want to look at it that way. It's a nice, easy way to think about it. To fight the undead, and they killed a really important undead, and this ticked off, but they took a lot of losses, and then they're on their way back, and this ticked off the biggest and bad, well, the leader of the Tomb Kings, Cetra.
Probably one of the most popular.
Cetra.
Probably one of the most popular.
Yeah, Cetra. Sound familiar?
In fantasy.
Okay, Cetra's one of the big deal.
Yeah. He's a big deal. He's the leader of the Tomb Kings, and he's a really powerful dude. He sends basically a huge invasion force of the undead, and the Arcane Journal, which is basically their magazine to help them continue to support fantasy without having to come out with a million new codexes and stuff.
Is it their White Dwarf?
More like
Who's
Spike
they? GW?
Games Workshop. It's more like this.
It's really closer to a supplement than a magazine.
Yeah, but I mean, they compared it to, I think, the Spike magazine, which is their Blood Bowl thing, which they come out with regularly to give you like, here's a new unit, here's a new little army, kind of, here's maybe an extra model. It's a way to support the game without having to like spend as much money as it costs to support the game. And then, like with Spike magazine, once a year,
They found success with that in Blood Bowl.
right? And once a year, then they'll do like a compilation, so you can just buy that. Anyways, so in this Arcane Journal, which is their way of adding to the lore and expanding the armies, and this one's about Bretonnia. It's about how the undead come up and they try to fight a couple cities, and it has some really cool stories of these sieges and these different battles. And then it says, and after all of these things happened, now this big undead army is marching towards Matoria, or however you're supposed to say the city.
Near
Matoria.
Matoria.
Yeah, and here's the cool thing though, and it says, and they march towards Matoria, and it goes ... and then you flip the page, and the scenario,
and you tell the story with the scenario. You say how it ends.
right?
Yeah.
And I'm just like, because I was like, when we looked at that and we were going to film it, I'm like, okay, they're going to tell us how it ends, and we're going to play a scenario, and maybe we won't get it. When I read that, I'm like, that's freaking awesome, because it's my universe. It's not theirs.
Yeah.
Sorry for the tapping. And I know that's loud. It's like boom, boom. I realize, but I love that because they're basically saying this is a setting, and as much as we will advance the lore and all that kind of stuff, it's your world. And so what happens next? It's like a choose your own adventure freaking book, where it's like, here's what happened up to it. Now roll the dice and tell us what happens next.
Here's the conclusion.
That's the way you do it.
You figure it out. Here's your.
I don't know what they're going to do for telling future lore about what happened. It might just have to be like their version of it, like the undead won or the undead lost, and they'll have to continue their own story. But in my fantasy universe, we will have our own answer.
I hope they do that to their other games instead of telling us what happened, and then
We'll see how successful it is here, right? Yeah.
Because they always tell you how it ends, right? There's like this whole Tyranid invasion in 40K, and they fought the Blood Angels, and they broke fists with the Necrons, and then they drove back the Tyranids. It's like, well, why don't you just stop right before they drove back the Tyranids and say ... here's your campaign.
I just thought of it now.
Oh, right. I know. Whoever thought of that idea,
those
keep that up.
missions have never been appealing to me. In fact, several years ago, it's probably still on the channel somewhere, Luca, Josh, and I worked on a fantasy end times campaign, and we decided to go through the narrative of that campaign by following the missions in order. And the very first mission, it tells you about how like the undead Manfred in particular raises Nagash, and here's the ritual to bring him back to life, which leads on to the next thing. And here are the elves that attack them, and you know the elves don't quite make it, and Nagash is risen, and the carry on campaign. He destroys the world. Well, on turn 1 of the game, somehow I made a bunch of 12-inch charges. He just killed the undead that started the ritual, and we couldn't.
No Nagash.
No Nagash.
You solved the end times.
Yeah. You just rolled stupidly well and just crushed me.
How, do you feel like, oh, this is our own story now?
I never want to do that again.
Right.
This scenario might have been well written and good, but like it's like I don't want to like retell a story that has the ending already written. This ... is so genius. I'll play this scenario over and over again.
No, it's tough like the end times where they're literally trying to tell the story to the end so they can blow up the world and bring it to Age of Sigmar. I get that, but I just never enjoyed that. It's just not my thing. So this is awesome, and I hope they do this a lot more.
That is a really good idea, because that gets me wanting to play.
Yeah.
And I'm the player who doesn't play fantasy.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm like, that sounds cool. How does chaos affect that? Is my question.
They'll be tied in shortly. That's when they're playing. Chaos will be one of the main focus points eventually.
Right now, chaos is not the predominant issue. The predominant issue is the undead.
Kings from Nehekara.
Yeah, specifically Tomb Kings.
Yeah.
When I say undead, it's
They could though, right?
you can totally play them.
Yep.
You can totally play them, but they're not like the thing quite yet.
There will be a release, I'm sure, at some point in the future where they will be.
They don't have to be the direct thing that influences the big thing right now, just as long as they can still be included. That's all I care about.
They're all of the armies are supported in the game. Some are in
Some more than others.
Some are in a PDF, which are like they're so far away geographically that they're not really a part of the narrative they're trying to tell, which is a focus on the old world and the Border Princes, which is directly below it. Maybe it's part of it. Technically, I don't know.
The Border Princes are part of it.
There we go.
Like when they show the map of the old world that's in the book, it goes all the way down, a little past the Border Princes into the Borderlands, I think it's called. They don't go down to the undead territories, and they don't go up to the Chaos Waste, but they kind of just touch the Chaos Waste.
So the story,
and they go nowhere near the where like Lizardmen and Dark Elves, and High Elves, all that stuff. The new, yeah. So it's just like if this is the picture of the old world, if this is the known world, because we keep saying old world, that took me a while to kind of realize that when people are talking about the old world, they're not talking about the world, they're talking about the one segment of the known world. I know, right? It's kind of confusing because I don't think there is a name. Is there a name for the planet?
No, I don't believe so.
So for everybody, what that's explaining is every time we say the old world, if you look at the world of Warhammer, the old world is what we would call Europe.
It's part of Europe.
Yeah, like Western Europe.
Yeah. So here's the world. We'll call it the known world, and then the old world is pretty much this much of it. Yeah. It is a very, very small amount of it, but it's incredibly dense in all the stuff that's going on. And so you have, and that's where you have the Empire. So you have Bretonnia, you have the Empire, you've got down to the Border Princes, you got a big old forest here full of wood elves, you got orcs everywhere. And to the north, up this way, you go up to Kislev, and then up there's the Chaos Waste, which is not on the map.
So currently,
and down south, when you get to the Tomb Kings area and all that, that's also not on the map. So it's focused on it's kind of like Middle Earth for Lord of the Rings. It's not the whole planet by a long stretch, but that's the focus of Lord of the Rings. So think of it that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very curious to see how much of the original lore is going to get retconned, because timeline wise, we're about 30 years before, if I remember correctly, 30 years before we started to see the rise of Magnus, a guy who will end up being Empire.
Not the same as Magnus from 40K.
Correct. Sorry.
Not the guy who did something very right or very wrong.
Not this.
No, it doesn't even really parallel.
Magnus does all sorts of stuff, right?
So
yeah.
In my mind, I don't know if I want the Chaos Arcane Journal, for the Warriors case, Arcane Journal to come out next or like last. If it's next, maybe we won't see a narrative of the section moved on, because it's hard to get all this out. But how much of the lore are they going to end up retconning with the old world? I'm okay if they retcon it all.
I think we just expand on it.
I think they're just going to flesh it out more than anything else.
Because like that time period is just kind of vague, and it's mostly just in codex.
Well, the reason why I'm saying is because but Matt was talking about how, like, you were talking about chaos and they're not a big part of the narrative yet.
They will be soon, though.
But of the old world timeline, we're about 30, 50-ish years from a big chaos incursion.
I can't remember who led that. That's not Crom the Conqueror. Who was it?
Comment below if you remember who that was. Thank you very much in advance.
You can spend a lot of your time, though, like one war. You could in a 5 to 10 year period. One war, like think about how many stories there are from World War I and World War II, and that's like
many.
That's like what, a 30? Is that a 30-year time period? So even leading up to that 30 years that you said, we had 2 world wars, and within those, how many movies could you write about specific one spot of one large confrontation? We have movies written about that time that dude helped the people at that one spot inside of this one battle. For just the 30 minutes of that,
there's enough
3-day battle.
We have stories about piano players who escape all the bombs.
Right. Yeah. And so you have so many stories you can tell. Obviously, with Warhammer Fantasy, you have to focus on the fights, because that's what But in the novels, you don't have to.
Lots of stories to be told is what you're saying.
Yeah. So you can just for 20 years, that's 1,000 battles, tens of thousands of battles.
The entire old world, set up an empire, and it can crumble and die.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
You never
we're
know.
because we're going to be playing a campaign
A blip
with
in
a map that we've created with the Hex and Hills stuff, where you guys are going to move around armies, and it's going to be our lore, and that lore could actually be correct because then 30 years later, chaos comes in, and it didn't matter what happened.
Yep.
It almost didn't matter. If you drop a nuke on somewhere and it blows up, it doesn't matter what the history was. And at that point, it just gets to that point, and they're gone now.
Yeah.
Whether or not
Fantasy lore
one side
isn't-
was winning, or the other side was winning.
Fantasy lore isn't filled out like the 40k lore. So there are fantasy lore takes place over thousands of years, and you can buy, back in the day you could buy an army book, they were called, with special named characters in it. And canonically, like the first named character died 500 years before the next named character was ever in the game. So there are massive gaps in the history throughout the written history of the fantasy lore that anything could have happened.
Every battle you do with your opponent, you kind of like dictate what the time period. You don't have to, but you can just play at any. You're playing at any random time period in the game.
I like that.
Yeah.
that's cool.
But
You can-
we're a handful of decades away from one of the major events currently.
Yeah,
Right.
But
So it makes you wonder what their
many
plan
things
is.
Could happen.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what their plan is,
Right.
because what they could have easily
Which
done,
is that.
I don't actually know how easily, but because when I read through the 10,000 years of Warhammer Fantasy lore, and it's 10,000 years, but it's not, it's not
Yeah, it's
10,000
not-
years.
yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
like, here's one date, here's 10,000 BC, and now here's 9,000 BC. It's like, well, technically there's 1,000 years of history, but they don't say anything about it, so it's pretty much nothing.
Nothing must have happened.
But still, it's like these very general sweeping things over and over and over again.
like the major.
But they decided to go to 250 years before, probably because that makes sure all those major factions are still around, but all the named characters are not. Well, pretty much all the named, except for maybe some elves, because elves lived for a long time. But all the other major characters are not there, except a few. And so it's like, well, what is your plan? Why are you doing that? Like, what's your intent here? Because you've already given us a little glimpse that we can tell our own story, but that's not going to stop you from making it your story. Like video games that give you an alternate ending, but then when you play the next one, it kind of assumes that one ending, right?
Yeah.
Except for really cool ones like Mass Effect, which let your things carry on until Mass Effect 3, which you find out that didn't matter. But anyways, so it makes are they going to continue the story, or are they just going to kind of be like, here you go, guys, you wanted Warhammer Fantasy back. We'll give you it back. We're going to let you buy all the models again. We'll give you arcane journals to keep kind of expanding on a few things, but lore-wise, this is where we're staying.
For
I don't know.
a decade and a half, 2 decades in 40k, we've been always 11 minutes to midnight with like various things. And if they did that with the old world, if we're always not quite at that major chaos incursion, which is going to set a lot of how the factions interact for hundreds of years, if we never actually get there, I'm happy with that.
Yeah, because you can still have chaos incursions, but they're not. Can you tell me on the tabletop what's the difference between representing a major chaos incursion and a minor one?
Nothing.
You're still going to bring 3,000 points.
Yeah.
And it still doesn't represent even a minor one.
Maybe if you
Right.
brought a named character, maybe.
Yeah, okay. A named character would be one way to do it. But for the most part, if I put 3,000 points of Tomb Kings on the table, that is a small skirmish force of the millions of undead that actually marched from their lands.
The cool thing about the tile campaign is
Cameron,
like
thank you.
the cool thing with the tile campaign is that at any point you can decide it's time for a major chaos incursion.
Right. It's like Luke is doing too well, so look who got nuked.
Yeah, just
Chaos came.
stacks and stacks and stacks of chaos just start coming down.
It sounds like
okay.
a video game almost.
It's almost sounds like a video game.
Does that sound familiar?
What it sounds like is the storytelling encouragement it gives you a much better cosmic sandbox. It basically adds water to it so you can build sandcastles. Is that accurate?
It's weird because it's such a small, like, compared to 40k, it's so much easier just to find a little pocket in 40k and you can do whatever you want over there. But the hope in this setting is the same thing, but
Yeah, that's always been the thing that kept me out of being a huge Warhammer Fantasy devotee, is that I found that no matter where I tell the story, it's too close to canonical places, and I like to leave the canon and do my own thing. And in 40k, I can literally nuke 10,000 systems, and the Imperium would 100 years later go be like, huh? Oh yeah, neat. Where those are gone. Like
now,
it's such a small percentage.
But now that they've set the setting 250 years previous to all the good, like all the solid lore we know, it's kind of a vague area.
So
So you
in
got to make
40K,
anything happen.
We don't know what happened there, so we can tell what
You have
happened.
the vastness of space to tell any story you want.
Right.
And the fantasy, you have the vastness of time.
Yeah, you have to use time instead of space, but time is difficult because then heraldry changes and named characters change, and if I go back 1,000 years in 40k, I can't bring a lot of the named characters we have now, right? Like the Primarchs aren't back and all that stuff. So it's tough for a model range. Like you look at BattleTech, and it's a good example of how tough it can be. BattleTech covers hundreds of years, and the history changes so quickly that there's like an encyclopedia for every mech to tell you here's the 25 different variations of that mech and which eras they were appropriate for. And most people, if you just play BattleTech, you're not going to care. It's like, oh, that mech is actually not around yet. It's like, who cares? But if you really want to deep dive into it, it's like, no, that pattern mech didn't exist until 50 years from what we're playing right now. So because we're playing in 3049, not 3059. And so you have to wonder which is better, right?
Luckily enough, for the fantasy's always been a little different from 40K. Named characters are always a little bit taboo, so you'd buy.
They were always super strong. Yeah,
That wasn't my experience.
I know.
yeah, and that was a bad experience.
Experienced the most egregious of it.
Yeah.
But for the most part, you buy a named character, cool to paint, but you always played as their generic version of that.
Yeah,
that was just what you did in fantasy.
Right.
Yeah, because they were always
Except-
a cut above. It always said in the rules, like, you know, you can. Here's an option of a character you can bring. Discuss it with your opponent before you bring it, because they are quite powerful.
Well, I would say for most war games, I'd just prefer no name characters.
Same.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I weirdly like the fantasy ones because they're kind of like, I like fighty guys. They're not really.
Well, then have like your lesser lord, medium lord, and heavy lord. Like
Yeah.
you can decide if you want to bring that 500 point character that's all decked out. That's fine. Just don't name them.
It's kind of like
I was gonna say, I think for fantasy for you, because you're so focused on the vampire counts, that
Yeah,
like
their name
those are
characters
those named characters, and the faction is so character dependent.
yeah.
That kind of makes sense. That the three guys that you know the stories of. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, they're kind of cool. And they're not usually nasty offenders. Vlad back in the day was kind of bad. Back in like 5th edition, he was really, really strong. But towards 8th edition, he was just kind of like you can make a stronger generic vampire than Vlad, right? Yeah.
But we go into crafting our own lore once
Yeah.
again. Name characters is the last thing you want to do, because
exactly.
you could tell your story and then they come out with an update to the lore that
What's
this
cool.
dude actually does this. And you're like, oh, that doesn't match my lore. Now my lore is really far from canon, not just like far as in physically far. Like I'm telling a story in this mountainous area that they've never talked about, so I can be whatever I want. Now it's like, that doesn't match anymore. So you kind of lose a little bit of that spark of creativity
The
for
nice
it.
thing about the campaign we're doing is we're going to have our own like generic characters leading these armies, but they're
right.
going to tell their own tale. They're going to get their own name. I'm going to name everyone.
They'll be dead long before all the important stuff happens in later lore,
They're
right?
going to accomplish great things. They're going to fall on the battlefield. They're going
But
to
not great enough to be recorded in histories.
yeah.
In Games Workshop's histories.
They're going to find artifacts. It's going to be great. Yeah.
But in the mini wargaming fantasy universe, the MWGFU.
Put a mark on the edit that.
Whoa.
It's like the most wholesome thing.
Whoa.
Reaction to that.
That's funny.
A little red there in the face there.
Well, it was a cinematic universe for 40K, so I always called it the MWGCU instead of the MCU. So yeah. You know what? It's the MWGFU.
Yeah. Well, the other
Fantasy universe
is
The
what
guy
that
not
means.
understanding that.
Yeah. Anyway, it's the mini wargaming fantasy universe.
I want that shirt.
That's
man.
what
You want the shirt now? Okay, but anyways, don't know what I was talking about. It's a little warm in here.
The other cool thing about the Arcane Journals, which is something they've never done in fantasy before, is different ways to build the armies based on like whatever narrative is in that Arcane
That's
Journal.
so exciting.
That is
I
super
love
unique. So
I
like
love what we have right
Bretonnians,
now.
for example, that in all in fantasy, it was like there was one, I'll say, force organization to build an army. You'd be like, you can bring this many points of characters, this many points of core you have to bring and all that. And these are what you can bring to fill those slots. But then in these Arcane Journals, you might be playing, instead of like a regular Bretonnian force, you're playing a Bretonnian exile force. Instead, those who are forced out of Bretonnia and they live in the border
The dishonored knights,
yeah,
right?
so now they don't get the blessing of the Lady of the Lake anymore. They get something completely different, and they build their army completely different as well. And they use gunpowder instead of, because they don't care about the honor of the Lady of the Lake anymore.
Tangent. Who's the Lady of the Lake?
Oh well, that is
Just some elf.
that's a mythical. It's a mythical creature in Bretonnia. That's where they tie into the Arthurian legend.
Yeah, Arthur got his sword
what?
from the Lady in the Lake in Arthurian legends.
Continue telling that story, please.
That's the story.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
going to assume nobody here has read anything about the Lady of the Lake in the Bretonnian book yet.
I have.
Okay.
But what do you want to say?
I haven't read it yet. Can you tell me where? Because that has changed canonically. It's been retconned. So what is it?
Because it's no longer an elf.
Well, it it wasn't an elf.
Matt, just tell a story, please.
Well, I don't remember all the details. I've been cramming.
Luca, do you know it?
I've been cramming fantasy stuff so that I can get ready for this campaign, and so some of it's going to be fragmented. But I thought the Lady in the Lake was an elf that was manipulating them to do what she wanted, so it would help the elves
I
overall.
only know what the magic of the blessing is. I don't necessarily know what exactly the lady is.
Oh, no, I gotta go grab the book.
The being that is the Lady of the Lake. Because like,
Thank you for those who have left the comment down
Yeah.
below, and we're going to read it after the fact.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna go.
I'm sticking
reread
with
it.
my explanation unless somebody has a better one for now.
Which is
What did you say, stupid elf?
Some
Guys,
old
just some
hag
elf.
distributing.
Oh, just some elf.
No, it's some old hag distributing. Oh, what's the line?
snake oil.
No,
Snake oil.
from Monty Python.
Oh, I don't know.
I don't know.
Again,
That
thank
doesn't
you, other
sound like a
commenter.
good way to find a leader.
Yeah.
Some old hag tosses me a piece of silverware. Now I get to be in charge. That's not the line. I'm butchering it. No, I gotta look at the line.
Effectively, like all of the Bretonnians revere the Lady of the Lake as like almost a deity in a way.
I remember that from Chaos Rising. Shout out to Chaos Rising, by the way.
Yeah. So they would
Look for it on YouTube.
As they go to battle, every Bretonnian takes a knee and prays to the Lady of the Lake for her blessing, and like you can physically see her magic sweep the battlefield, almost like a low hanging fog that kind of like encapsulates the Bretonnian army and goes just off the surface of the grass, and it magically protects them as long as they keep their vow. They don't retreat, honorably fight their opponents, and all that stuff.
What's funny, Matt? Are you looking at what?
It's the Monty Python
The
script.
script.
It's a script. And I'm not. I don't know if I'll butcher the English accent here. The,
Oh,
the
here we
Lady
go.
of the
Here
Lake.
we go.
Well, how'd you?
You're not. You can't even, Steve.
You don't
You
vote for
can't even.
kings?
You can't.
Well, how do you become
Python.
king then?
Is this? You don't want to ruin your childhood? Is what's going on?
No, Steve hates Monty Python.
Steve does not like
Yeah.
Monty Python. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe because I quote it too often.
I love Monty Python.
The Lady of the Lake, her arm clad in the purest shimmering samite, held aloft Excalibur from the bosom of the water, signifying by divine providence that I, Arthur, was to carry Excalibur. That is why I'm your king.
He's gone.
Listen. Strange woman lying in ponds distributing swords is no basis for a system of government. Supreme executive power derives from a mandate from the masses, not from some farcical aquatic ceremony. Be quiet. Well, but you can't expect to wield supreme executive power just because some watery tart threw a sword at you. Shut up. I mean, if I went around saying I was an emperor just because some moistened bint had lobbed a scimitar at me, they'd put me away. Shut up, will you? Shut up. Oh, no, we see the violence inherent in the system. Shut up. Oh, come and see the violence inherent in the system. Help, I'm being repressed.
The help of being That's so good. That's that Warcraft. It gets me so good. Help, I'm being repressed.
Bloody peasant.
Steve.
I think
What a
we just-
giveaway. Did you hear that? Eh? That's what I'm on about. Did you see him repressing me?
So
You
good.
saw it, didn't you?
we just ruined fantasy for him, and I love it.
It's so
This
good.
is now his memory of the new fantasy discussion.
Oh,
I know, because it went from him being very excited to learn the story that the actually Games Workshop has put out.
We're
to
no
being-
longer talking about anything you don't want to hear.
well, that's not true.
That might
not
be, that might be a lie.
not true.
No, that's not true.
Lady of the Lake from now on is just some moistened bint. And I'm sorry if that's like a horrible thing to say in England.
I don't know. It sounds aggressive.
It sounds pretty
Are you
aggressive.
saying bint?
Bint. B-I-N-T.
Yeah, I don't know. Ooh.
Moistened bint. The moistened part is just because she's in the water. That's fine.
wonder if
For
this
those
comes
on
off
that side of the
extremely
pond,
vulgar,
please
where you-
define
Yeah.
bint
Are you-
for those of
Hold
us who
on,
are on
I'm
this
gonna
side of the
make sure.
pond.
Watch it be like
An
this.
offensive way of referring to a woman. That's all it says.
Oh, jeez.
No,
Because in these
That
ears,
sounds bad.
I'm glad I
yeah,
didn't
you don't
say
never
that word a
don't
bunch.
define it. Never mind it.
That sounds rough. It's probably fine. Hey, you know what?
It's not from my country, so if it's a swear word, I didn't swear.
You know, honestly,
To
like
us,
that,
it
it's the
means
first time I've heard that word. So
it's like get, right? It's
Yeah.
like that's an English
yeah.
thing. To
I bet
make
it's
fun of
so
somebody.
common that
Yeah.
it's like, yeah.
Yeah.
Moistened.
Some moistened bint. Sorry if that's really bad.
That's all right.
I apologize.
And you know, we've said it now many
Plug your
times,
ears, children.
So if it is offensive,
well, then how about we just say a watery tart?
That could be worse.
that could be worse.
Moist. Yeah. That,
Contribution.
we'll just combine them. A
So
moistened tart.
what do you know about the Games Workshop written lore? About
I don't remember anymore.
What are we even talking about anymore?
All I know is that whoever got the sword from that watery tart should not be in
you asked
charge.
me what the Lady of the Lake was because I said
Yes,
you
well,
could
who's the
play-
Lady of the Lake?
Well, I said you
A
could be
moistened
the
bint is the Lady of the Lake?
You could be the exile of Bretonnia. You don't get the blessing of the Lady of the Lake anymore. And like, what's the Lady of the Lake? I'm like, I don't know, dude.
A watery tart distributes swords.
The watery tart makes sense because Lady of the Lake, water. Okay, I get it.
I know in Total War Warhammer you can play the Fey Enchantress. I don't think that's the Lady of the Lake, but it might be.
That sounds like a stupid elf to me, right, Josh?
I think those are different. I never said stupid. I think the Fey Enchantress is separate.
Did he not say stupid
okay.
elf,
Yeah,
Josh?
I imagine it would
Steve,
be.
did he
I don't
not say
think
stupid
it's
elf? He
No,
said
it's
stupid
just
elf.
the
That's
Mel.
right. Yeah, we were wrong about this whole conversation. Actually, the Fey Enchantress
Is the
used to
stupid
be
elf.
Morgana fae.
Yeah.
Who got retconned to being an elf. The Lady of the Lake was never actually talked about.
Morgana, yeah.
What is the Lady of the Lake?
Hey, you guys are supposed to know this stuff.
The Lady of the Lake,
She's beautiful.
she's the Bretonnian goddess.
Who is she?
Yeah,
She's an elf.
Yeah,
she's a
she's like
fae.
We're talking about Lady of the Lake now, right?
she's the god of.
Well,
yeah.
She's the
okay,
one that
so
got
Are we
not a-
talking about Lady of the Lake?
yeah, but the Lady Lake from Bretonia. Forget about anything
Okay,
elf related.
Bretonnian Lady of the Lake.
She's the goddess of purity, nobility, and courage in the face of danger. She is the ideal lady, everything a knight should love and strive to serve. So
Did she write that herself?
probably it sounds like Bretonnian it sounds like Lady of the Lake propaganda. So
But yeah,
Is propaganda, Josh?
yeah, because like Morgana Le
Probably.
Fay was like the
Yeah,
classic
dude,
Arthurian.
I never cared about
bunch
Bretonnians.
of comments already.
Yeah.
20 minutes ago.
Yeah, it's
We
yeah,
got
that's,
mixed up.
that's the Maelstrom, ladies and gentlemen. That's just what it is.
I don't really know.
if you search for the Bretonnian knights search for the Holy Grail, and if they find it, they get to meet the Lady in the Lake.
So wait, the Fae Enchantress doesn't exist right now in the timeline. Or
I don't recognize that name, so I don't know.
Please tell
Morgana
me the
Le Fay.
difference between the Lady of the Lake and the Fey Enchantress.
I think she's like a malicious being in the Bretonnian setting, kind of like she's like self-involved.
Oh, okay. So it was in the end times revealed that she was an elf. So during the end times, Lilith, the elven goddess of the moon, dreams, and fortune. Oh wait, no. No, never mind. I'm reading it wrong. Tasked the wood elf glade lord to rescue Shalia, the goddess of mercy and compassion, from the realm of Shayla. It sounds like Shalia, but whatever.
I think it's around Sheila.
So she, Lilith, and Ulrich, the god of war and winter, could save oh goodness. Later, she revealed herself to be the Lady of the Lake, having taken up the persona to cultivate worshippers among men.
there you go.
So no, Lilith.
Lilith is an elven god.
So
Yeah.
I do remember
Yeah.
that the Lady of the Lake was an
Who was
aspect.
and she, according to the end, so this is canon. Lilith, the elven goddess of the moon, dreams, and fortune, is the true identity of the Lady of the Lake. So there's an elven goddess who's basically like manipulating men to cultivate more followers.
So Josh was right. Just
It's some elf. Yeah, some elven goddess.
Man, we should just listen to Josh.
She sounds nice though.
You should never just listen to Josh.
Moons, dreams, and
Just to
fortune.
clarify.
Yeah. Yeah, she doesn't seem evil.
Okay, cool. All right, awesome. That's
So the Bretonnians worship an elven god unknowingly.
Okay, so here, I guess here's another, because I don't know how well you know timeline stuff, Steve, but the Great Maw, has the Great Maw landed at this time? Like, when did that thing actually
honestly
hit?
Don't think so, but I will not bet anything on
Sorry, what was that?
what's the Great Maw?
Maw.
Oh, the Great Maw. The Great Maw
The-
for
the
sure
Great
exists.
Maw
For sure.
Does it
exists,
for
yeah.
sure?
Well, it's like
What's the Great Maw?
Oh, okay, yeah, because there's a migration.
It's I like to call it the Great Maw.
A big mouth.
Welcome to this segment where it's just reading from Wiki.
Yes, and
So the best faction that exists in old Warhammer Fantasy.
Here's the
was
propaganda.
it was the ogres.
the Ogre tribes.
So the ogre tribes, and I want to say because they used to live further out east.
For sure they did, yeah.
And then there was
Over the mountains, yeah.
some catastrophic thing that landed from space and it ended up being a giant mouth in the ground.
So the catastrophic thing that landed from space for the humans, the Skaven, and
The twin-tailed comet turned out to be the Great Maw for the ogres.
No,
was
I'm saying all this, everything in the old world was a catastrophic thing that fell from space.
Oh
yeah.
yeah.
so there was
Scholars
this,
believe that it's just a simple meteorite of great size that hit the ogres really hard. Hits their original homeland. And like, oh, it must be a mouth because it's deep. It's like,
Well,
no,
no,
that
no,
was just a big rock.
it is
It's
it's a giant mouth and then they feed things to it.
Eats, yeah, because it consumes things. The
Where's
whole
the stomach?
It's in the crust of the
It's
earth,
the Sarlacc pit.
It's like a Sarlacc pit from Star Wars. It's huge.
but just a huge one.
The
Yeah.
thing that Boba Fett fell in?
Yes.
Yes, that's in the Boba Fett fell into.
But much bigger.
Got
But it's
pushed
huge.
into.
It's got
So that's a
It formed-
baby Big Maw?
it formed teeth.
Yeah, that
The
would be, yeah.
ogres worship it as a god.
Yeah, they
So it
draw,
forces them-
gut magic from it.
Yeah, that's where they get their gut magic from.
Okay.
It forces the
them, yeah.
ogres to move west into the mountains.
Wait, why were you so certain it's already fell?
Oh, I don't know.
Because the migration took a while, but again, I
Into
don't
the
know.
west.
They got the ogres move
No, it
50%
totally,
faster than everybody else.
No,
so
it totally should have already fallen because it says that it fell like thousands of years ago.
Yeah,
Okay,
I
so
thought it
then-
was like an
okay.
old thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
The ogres
The
have been
ogre-
around.
Why did you bring up the Big Maw?
because I like ogres.
Josh is he likes the
Because
ogres. Yeah.
it's the one faction that I like.
They aren't.
Well, them and the dwarves,
What's
but
your
I never
favorite
had a
flavor of
dwarf
yogurt?
army.
I like yogurt.
like yogurt.
But yeah, the Great Maw totally is already there. It has to be, unless they retcon it because it says
Because we went from Lady of the Lake to Big Maw.
which is it's on point
Because it
because
just
they're
ended up being
both
something else.
underground beings that provide power to their followers who worship it.
Yep.
And who worships the big
So
one? The ogres?
apparently that peasant was wrong. That watery tarts are in fact distributing swords are in fact a good way to determine who's in charge.
Yep. Also, I guess in the fantasy setting is a great example of like through worship you get divine blessing as well in this setting.
Yeah, it's just
I guess that's like a standard fantasy.
yeah, sure.
They're all orcs.
Okay,
Yeah.
you know what I hope. These are my hopes for the game. Okay, because I'm interested in the game, and it
You
sounds.
have a blast playing chaos.
I actually this campaign now.
You get gifts of chaos and all this stuff.
Yeah, by the time
it's
this
all
episode over,
there.
campaign may have already started.
You have to issue challenges, all that stuff. Yeah. Oh, yep.
Okay, you know what? That actually really makes me want to play fantasy.
Yep.
'Cause-
You got the biggest, baddest guys too.
So here's a question for you guys: should I participate in this campaign?
Yeah,
Yeah,
if you want to.
chaos. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because I love chaos. I want to play more.
I'm designing. Okay, this is speaking from the future's past because
Yeah,
this episode might be out after we
got
actually
it.
start the campaign. But I'm designing it in such a way that I'm going to be I'm still working on designing the exact story because it's going to be based off of what everybody decides they want to do. So if you bring chaos, well, then
yes.
chaos will be part of the story. If
Okay.
nobody brings chaos, then chaos is not
chaos
part of
will
the
be
story.
part of the story.
Right. Except for maybe like NPC factions. Like if a guest wants to participate, it's like, okay, we'll say there's a little incursion right here and we'll play that out.
They will join sides with chaos. It'll be glorious.
No, I'm just trying to say though, like if there's a faction that's not represented, we could always represent it in like a one-off, just as like a, you've kind of how like when you play Total War Warhammer or any Total War, if you go too far away from cities, they might rebel or something.
Yeah.
And so, we got to go take care of that. And so even though like it's not a new faction coming in, it could just be you losing some ground.
Yeah. They could just
So
the guests can come in and grief you.
Right, exactly. So yeah, people can come in and grief you basically. So like they want to play orcs and nobody's representing orcs, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so if you weren't to play chaos, they wouldn't be part of the primary story, but they'd still show up because we want to represent some of the other factions as well.
Okay.
So you can either come in just like casually and be like, hey, you know what? I want to play for just 3 or 4 games and just be like, I'm just going to screw over Luca, who's trying to build his empire, and I'm just going to right through it, and then they're going to lose. You can just say, we got our objective as some artifact, and we leave. Yeah, but you leave them in ruins. you could do it that way too.
Yep.
And I will totally do it that way.
Ironically, it's serving the will of chaos. It's like, okay, we're going to add some chaos right here.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's just it's like a crusade. It's like your warriors are on a crusade just to, there's this one, maybe a meteor fell. Like that seems to be
They will walk the
a plot
eightfold
point
path.
of Warhammer Fantasy. Lots of meteors, and they'll just punch through, and you have like 4 games to get it. If you don't get 4
Half
games,
of the corn.
then he gets it. That kind of thing. So that could be
Done.
fun.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
And it's like a good excuse to kind of learn it too. Because like, this is my first game. And
Yeah.
this is like brand new. So we're going to do simple things. Therefore, it's corn.
Yeah. Well, I don't think fantasy will be hard to learn. There's a lot of the nuances of
Says
how.
the genius.
No, I mean like
That one.
you're
You-
moving.
It's a fact. Matt the
One
genius
of
is
my-
humble about
so
it.
You
Matt
want me to
is-
teach you how to play fantasy?
okay.
Are you arranged to declare charge? Yes or no? Here's your flow chart.
Yes.
Yes, then you charge. And if it's
I'm
no,
saying yes. I don't know.
If
Is it 8 inches?
It's a flow.
No, I'm saying it's a flow chart.
Can
So
you
when
charge?
when
Yes
you
or
go
no?
to the table and play the
Oh,
game,
now I
your
see, I
flow
see.
chart.
So it's
Are you
like-
in range
it's-
charge? Yes. Okay, then you charge. If you're not in range, then you march. Done.
Unless you have bows, then you
Rinse and
shoot.
repeat.
No bows.
No, Matthew, don't be
No,
ridiculous.
we're not.
Don't ridiculous. Who brings a bow to a
Do you
knife
have
fight?
magic? No.
He's
Do you have
playing
archery? No.
chaos.
Yeah.
So okay, hold on one second though, okay? Because like for a brand new player, it could be very intimidating, right? It's
It
like
is.
okay,
It is
it's a brand new
intimidating.
gaming
It's a much
system.
bigger book.
It's gaming system. Plus, it's like when I look at fantasy and I see those blocks of things, I'm like, I have no clue.
Well, that makes it easier actually
That
because when you
technically makes
move,
it easier. It
you're
looks-
just moving one movement tray rather than moving 30
You have
guys.
to
You're
think
just
of
going.
it as one model.
Yeah,
Think
it's
of
just-
that brick as one model.
One model of 25 wounds is a good way to
So
look
is
at
that
it.
okay? So each dude is a wound.
Yes,
kind of
correct.
It's like once you lose, like you can fight with only the first couple ranks depending on what weapons you have.
Like that's a
And
simple
so if you lose enough dudes, then you're going to start losing attacks as well, right? But overall, you just treat them as one blob.
Yep.
And overall, with plenty of exceptions, and any weird thing that comes up, like when you're charging and you're going to hit a certain corner, you don't know if you're going to wrap around that way. That's where you let the other player figure it out.
Yeah.
So you can learn 95% of the rules that you need to know. It's that last 5% where it gets a little dicey because with movement trays, you get all these weird exceptions of
This-
well, this is actually a flank charge.
This edition
but for
has-
the most part, it's like, yeah, that's a straightforward charge. Oh, that's a straightforward charge. Oh, that's a straightforward charge.
This edition clarified that the best. I have never seen an edition written better to accommodate for all the weird things.
So
They even get to the point where it just says, if you can't close the door in any way at all, you leave them touching and figure it out. They even say that in the rule book.
Right.
Figure it out amongst yourselves. So back in
Just
the
some elf.
older editions
Just
of
some
fantasy,
elf.
you used to be able to manipulate it so people couldn't charge no matter what. Even if you just touch, it counts as a full-on charge.
Right. So
it's a disorder charge.
For the last two little mini discussions we've had today, Josh actually just said it perfectly, and then you guys talked for about 10 minutes about what Josh just said in 3 words.
yeah.
Flowchart.
That's the way the whole company works.
Yeah.
Some elf flowchart.
Are we here to sum up everything in just a few words and then like end the episode? Lorehammer, what would you like in the future of 40K? More orcs. Thanks for showing up, everybody.
Yeah.
That's actually
I'd watch
Chaos
it. That
wins.
sounds like a great segment.
Josh,
Thanks for
you
coming,
said
everybody.
that.
More of this in the vault. Flowchart. Become a vault member, and I'll tell you another answer to one more question.
No, the fantasy is a very daunting looking game. It is very intimidating. I don't like just
Agreed.
at a glance. Like you're not
Agreed.
wrong. You're not wrong to think that.
Yeah, because like there's more of a
yeah.
reference with 40K, and even still that one is
No,
like,
you got to forget 40K, but you could learn it fast.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you all the little.
I trust it if you say that to me,
Yeah.
Matt.
Yeah,
You say
could
I
learn-
will learn it fast.
You could show up not having played, and we could film a battle report, and it would be okay.
As long as the other guy knows it well.
As long as the other person knows what they're doing, because their decisions when you look at the table are obvious.
Yeah.
Like Josh said, it's not as simple as are you in range of charge, otherwise no, because there might be scenarios and objectives
If
on the
you're
table.
playing Warriors of Chaos Corn, then yeah,
But there
no,
might
it
be
is.
objectives on the table he's trying to accomplish, in which case you might want some
Charging
tactics.
is the
Go back down,
objective.
Josh, go back down.
Charging is the objective.
No, you don't know the
main
scenarios
burn.
we're going to play. We're going to be playing scenarios that aren't just like run across the table and kill each other. But but all I'm trying to say is when you look at the table, you'll be like, okay, what do I do next? Well, obviously these guys are in a position that I should charge, or a position where I should maybe go over here and march that way. You're right, charge. You're right. If you want to boil it down, geez,
Yeah.
you could say things for 40K.
When
Do I shoot, charge, or move? Right. That's it.
You know what? I am your litmus test, right?
Yep.
If it's easy to get into and it looks like it's fun,
It's
then
like-
I will play it.
It's when
If
you-
somebody's teaching you, it'd be easy. The book itself is I wouldn't say is like the easiest book to read and get into.
when you're playing,
Reading
like,
equals pain.
getting over that initial hump of like it.
I don't want to read.
Yeah. Getting over the initial hump of it looking intimidating. Once you're into the game, it's all like instinct driven. Like
It is.
Good. That's how I operate everything in my life.
yeah.
It feels more like almost like a computer game where you just like click this, do that, and
Like you
then
know
the
what you
computer
want
figures
to
out the
do,
rest.
right?
Yeah.
The question is, how do I
Move forward in corn.
Yes.
That's what I want to do.
You do, and if you get caught in bad positions, well, that's the game. It doesn't really matter. You still, yeah.
Them
Well, that's
the
where
dice.
that's where the tactics come in. Like
Yeah.
it's like, well, do I want to?
One tactic. Move forward in corn.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's how I have my fun.
That's you can play it that way. That's
this,
fine.
This is a game. This edition looks so well. Like my favorite thing about the edition is like you put your models where you want to put them, and you put them in the direction you want to put them, and the dice tell the story. Yeah.
The dice forge the narrative, do they?
Yes. Yes, indeed they do.
Shout out.
Shout out to the dice for forging the narrative. Thank you, dice.
Thank you, dice.
You can buy dice at
Thank you, Game.
MiniWarGamingForge.com.
Thank you, game, for letting the
brought right
dice
back.
tell the story.
Seriously, actually.
Yeah.
I believe that you're serious.
Though a little part of me, I'm like super
serious that
happy
you
with the
believe.
rules. But a little part of me thinks that the rules are like, even I think they're a little complicated. Like as a person who's going to try to learn them completely and fully, I find them quite a bit complicated. Not that they're
And you know how to play it.
not that they're like, oh, I don't know how this works or that works. It's just there's so much and it's so well done, and there's an answer for everything. You just have to look a little bit.
Is it crunchy?
I mean,
It doesn't have to be.
no, for you as a player who doesn't want to worry about that, it will never be.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But for the guy who knows,
I-
it's like for the DM, yes.
I may have not played a lot of fantasy recently, but I played a lot of it during I think 6th and 7th. I don't remember the editions, a couple editions, and like those weird situations that come up that you have to figure out. That's not the norm, but they have to describe them in the rules.
Yes.
Because once you have things on movement trays and you're and the where you charge, like is it a side charge, front charge, or back charge? Where as soon as that's important. Do you remember like 7th edition vehicles facing mattered?
Facing
So all-
was awesome.
Right. And so
Yeah, it's
but
cool.
all of a sudden
Melt the gun to the rear.
Right, but all of a sudden, and for the most part, it was straightforward. But there's those times where you're like, "Am I hitting your front or your side?" Not quite sure. Oh, and I'm hitting your side, but I can't see the side. So what does that do again? Well, it means you hit the front, but with better, but they get a better armor or something, or they
The whole-
whatever it was. I don't even remember.
So that's a great example. Like they had really complex rules for it. And you could never remember it, but you just quickly find it.
And or you just like it barely ever came up.
Yeah.
And so, but they still need to have an answer, so it gives the impression that the rules are crunchy when you're only using a small percentage of the rules
It's a
most of the
weird-
time.
I don't even know what I would call it. The exact. It's like
It's the 80-20 rule.
Yeah, 20% of the rules cover 80% of the stuff.
exactly that. Yeah. The
See,
game,
that I
The
get.
other 80% cover the other 20%.
Yeah.
And that's where people will get a lot of things wrong and where I just don't give a crap. It's like, oh, you know what? This it looks like a side. Oh, it looks like this.
WGFU, got it.
Yeah.
In the MWGFU, yes.
Yep. So it's one of those, like, you read through the rules, and you're reading the rules like, man, I've been reading these for a long time, and I'm not even through this one section yet. You'll almost never come across most of those.
Yeah.
They're more of an answer to a problem than actual rules you come across often in the game.
Josh, how would you sum up that?
Move forward, charge.
Yeah, move forward. Yeah, already did. They're literally just
You know what
piggybacking
the best
onto my
part
point.
is? You know what the best part about playing Khorne as Warriors of Chaos? You have a rule called Frenzy. You don't even get control over your guys.
You know better.
You know a flow chart.
It literally
Just
tells
charge.
you. It literally tells you what you do.
Just flow with the chart. I love it. It's pure chaos. Okay, you know what? Done. Sold. I'll do it.
Yeah.
I'll
'cause,
instantly engage because that's how I have my fun. I don't have my fun by like reading things that I'm assume are complex, even though I don't know they're complex. That's the assumption because the rule book is the size that it is, so it gives the illusion that it is complex.
It just covers every weird thing that can come up.
That's good to know.
You just gotta learn your particular faction. Again, you guys might be able to correct me.
You
'cause
only play Chaos.
I haven't
You just
looked at
play
the rule a
Chaos.
lot, but if you were playing Warriors of Chaos, Mark of Khorne, you wouldn't have to learn the magic rules because you don't do it.
No magic.
And there's no ranged attacks for you to learn.
Magic's an illusion.
So
there's no magic.
Literally 2 phases that you just get to not worry about.
Correct.
You can have some like Marauder Horsemen with like.
If you want it, you can.
Yeah, you might have minor shooting, like throwing
There's
javelins.
like Hell Cannon.
That's cool kind of
You have
shooting,
some
though.
demonic artillery you can bring.
Sounds good.
Yep.
Artillery has its own rules, but it's fun rules.
It's super fun.
Like it tracks how a cannonball like
bounces over
through
the
lines.
battlefield. Like if
And so it's like, yeah, it's a little more crunch, but it's fun crunch.
It doesn't
in
feel
that
like
case.
crunch at that point.
No,
I want to
it's like,
know
okay,
where that goes.
Where does the cannonball land? Now, where does it bounce? Now, draw a line and right through all those dudes.
Yeah,
And
it's that wacky stuff that actually makes it fun and flavorful.
one of my,
Unless your cannon eats the crew.
unless the cannon blows up.
the demonic.
Which it
No,
could do as well.
the Hell Cannon.
Or the hell cannon actually turns around and goes,
You actually lose control of it. It randomly pivots.
Oh, actually, yeah, because again,
That sounds
it's been a
fun
while
too,
since the
though.
Hell Cannon. The Hell Cannon can move and charge and stuff, right?
Yeah.
I haven't checked in the.
Oh, okay, but under fantasy,
I
old
remember
fantasy rules.
correct.
You know what I love about this? It's like, that'd be amazingly fun. And like, no, that wouldn't be fun because we don't have control over the explosion. We want to make sure all our guys are safe. I love how it's like tactics versus like explosions.
yeah. Well, isn't like Colin with his Skaven just known for all his
Only misfires.
only misfires?
Worse. But the Skaven have the best
His
misfires.
middle name is Misfire. Colin Misfire.
Skaven had what now?
It's like your artillery had a 1 in 6 chance of misfiring. Like it's all shot, not shoddily.
It could be incredibly powerful.
It's like the Orc Shock Attack gun of
Yeah, yeah,
old editions.
Yeah.
It feels like that, yeah.
Exactly.
kinda like that.
Like
Bazap.
Just as much chance of hurting you as them, but when it hurts them, oh boy.
So like a demon weapon of old
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, so the Skaven always had like the highest damage potential, but also the highest risk to themselves.
Awesome. I love armies like that.
So like,
Even Sigmar, they do that as well with a lot of
do.
things,
They-
which is
they-
hilarious to watch.
they've written it very well in Sigmar to represent how it used to work in
Yeah.
fantasy. Not as mechanically complicated, but it still gets to the same end result through fewer mechanics.
Oh yeah, where they go,
Like
or they
one-
go, wow,
one of my-
okay, you win.
One of my favorite actually all the war machines in fantasy have really cool ways how they interact on the battlefield. One of my favorites is like the bolt thrower though, like just like a big ballista essentially. Like it'll hit a guy in the front rank and it'll pierce through all the guys right behind him. You have a mechanic for it, but you could just like pierce through 5 guys in one shot
But it gets
Like-
progressively less strong for each guy.
Yeah, it's -1 strength for
because
each.
it loses momentum.
Like strength 8, 7.
There's a
6,
bit of
5,
insulation.
4.
Yeah.
So if you're the 4th dude, it's like,
There used to be an 8th edition. I don't believe they have it anymore, but they had an 8th edition with the ogres catching cannonballs. It was always hilarious.
ogres catching cannibals.
So like if the cannonball didn't kill an ogre because they had multiple wounds, like he would just like Homer Simpson and whenever he got remember
Because the cannonball basically did a line.
Or Kung Fu Panda.
or Kung Fu Panda
Thank you.
Kung Fu Panda, yeah. So like they would catch the cannonball. See all these memories, all these great things from fantasy, right? Like it's
well, that's
I love-
cool.
I love the game.
It sounds like there's a lot of just fun, wacky stuff too.
But you have to be in the right mindset for the game because a lot of the game is out of your control in a lot of ways.
Good.
Yes, but like that could be frustrating for players who are used to the games being in their control.
But if you think control is an illusion anyway,
Yeah.
then it's your game.
Yeah.
I like it. I like
Yeah.
it. I like it, Steve. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a good place to wrap it up.
Thanks for watching this episode of Maelstrom of Lore. You help to support the show by becoming a Vault member, and when you purchase things on the MiniWarGaming Forge, you get 20% off if you're a Vault member, so there's an added benefit to that. Thank you very much, guys, for all of your support, and let us know what you'd like to see in the future. Leave it in the comments below. Thank you very much, and happy wargaming. Thanks again for tuning in, folks. I'm MiniWargamer Dave, and you're in the Maelstrom of Lore.